All right, guys. All right, so this meeting is now called to order. Welcome to our August board meeting. Ms. Gaynor, please introduce our visitors. Sorry, Kate.
Good morning. I'm going to start back here at this corner with Dr. David Carlson. He's chair of the Faculty Senate. Here we have Barry Honka, our General Counsel, Lee Kibble, who's Director of Internal Audit, Vice President Marilyn Fillet, Valerie Maxwell, who's Director of Budget Management, Vice President Tony Vidmar. Over here to this wall, we have Provost James Johnson, Vice President Keith Lamb. We also have with us Lana Sweeten-Schultz from the Times-Record News, and I want to take just a moment. This will be Lana's last meeting with us, and she's moving on. So I want to thank her for her wonderful coverage of the university while she's been reporting for the TRN. Thank you, Lana. We also have with us Angie Gray, who is chair of the Staff Senate, and Cindy Ashlock, executive assistant.
It really is. Good.
Thank you very much. Well, Regent Burks will participate in the meeting via conference call and will join us for the regular meeting after lunch. Our new student regent, Shayla Owens, is attending her first board meeting as student regent. Shayla, welcome. We look forward to having you work with us in your new capacity this year. At your seat, you have a new MSU Texas Padfolio from Tony in his office. They're super nice. Sean and Shayla, we were told you already have one, so if that's not correct, tell me no. Okay. As a reminder, this meeting is streamed live on the internet, so please silence your phone devices. Mostly that message is for me. We provide an opportunity for public comment concerning agenda items at the beginning of each meeting, and no one has signed up to speak, so we'll move on with our agenda. Item 17-111, FY18 budget review. We scheduled this time for budget review, and everyone will ask questions as information is presented. The budget will be formally presented for approval later today. Dr. Shipley will make opening comments, followed by Dr. Fillet. Dr. Shipley?
Dr. Fillet is here. Okay. Here. So Dr. Fillet and her staff did a great job on this year's budget. I'm glad we have this time to get into the details of it. The only surprise that came forward for us was the amount of reduction of state support. We had entered our work with our Budget Oversight Committee assuming about a $1.2 million reduction based on watching what was happening in the House and the Senate, but that reduction grew over the spring semester by about $500,000. So we had the budget all set and ready to go, and then we saw another $500,000 reduction, and I'll talk in a minute about what comprised that reduction. What I was really proud of was that our campus rallied to save money from the spring semester. We curtailed year-end spending so that we could front load that $500,000 from this budget into next year. It will look a bit like we're relying on reserves, but they were intentional reserves. This is a normal action in higher education. It's a smart action for higher education, and we'll be able to see a balanced budget today that will carry through in a balanced nature for the biennium. The reduction came from, first, a reduction in institutional enhancement. We lost about 30% of our institutional enhancement, and that was because a big topic of this year's budget deliberations were the special items funding that so many universities have. We don't really have special items funding. The only item that falls under that is our small business group in the business college, and they received a reduction. So we got hit especially hard on the one special item we have, which was institutional enhancement. The other thing that held us back is we have a formula funding pool that is dispersed across the universities, and it's the same pool for everybody, so it doesn't, it's a set number. So your piece of that pie varies according to what the formula is and what you've been doing according to growth. Our growth has not been as rapid as many institutions that were receiving formula funding, and then also the formula emphasis shifted from undergraduate to PhD programs. So often the needs of the state determine the philosophy behind formula funding, and you'll see shifts in weighting of the funding formulas, and this year the weighting went to PhD programs. My takeaway from those decisions that I'll speak with the board later is that we need to heighten our influence in the legislature. We need to carry greater influence. We need to know more about how we can affect these decisions. Debbie and I spent time there. Debbie did a great job, but we came out in probably the bottom quartile of funding, and we'll be dispersing a sheet to show you how all the institutions' funding was affected during this session. So we need to flip that and get in the top quartile of funding next time, and that will be our goal. The second thing I'm really, really proud of, in addition to the year-end savings, is the work of this Budget Oversight Committee. I've been really pleased with the work of committees here at the university, and this committee made the same decisions we would have made. They forwarded decisions about the budget that were deliberative, that were all-encompassing. The members of the committee went back to the members of their areas and got input, and I think we came out with a great recommendation that the cabinet received and accepted and moved into the budget creation. So I think the time is here for Marilyn and her staff to go over the budget with us carefully, unless you have any questions before that happens. Thank you.
All right. I think everyone has been at one of these workshops in the past, so what I'm telling you is we're not starting from scratch. And Shayla was also part of the Budget Oversight Committee the last couple years, so she's pretty well familiar with how we put a budget together and the ins and outs of it. So I won't take too much time kind of rehashing things you already know. But basically, when we look at our budget, a couple things we do is, number one, look at only those areas that are centrally funded. The whole budget, the $117 million budget that you'll see this year, is made up of lots of pieces. But the piece that we really concentrate on is the stuff that's centrally funded. That's where we get our appropriation, most of our tuition and fees. We do have restricted funds that are restricted to whatever the donor gave us the money for, or the grantor gave us the money for. We have specialized fees, like the rec fee. So we're not going to be talking about those things today, because those are already going to be spent on the areas that they were set up for. We're talking about the big central pot of money that we have in order to pay most of the salaries and wages and the administration of the campus, the faculty salaries. So when we look at these numbers, that's pretty much what we're looking at, is that central budget, and not looking at all of the $117 million, okay? So the number one thing that drives a budget is enrollment. And we look very carefully at enrollment. We have formulas that we use, correlations from one year to the next. So when we look at our numbers, we take this year's numbers and we kind of carry them forward with correlations that have been built from, Valerie's been doing it for over 20 years. So she goes back, way back, and looks at those correlations from one year to the next, from freshman to sophomore, sophomore to junior, junior to senior. And based on those past correlations, predicts what we will have next year and in future years. We also run it by Dr. Lamb's office for admissions and get his feel and his read on what those numbers would be. And we come to kind of a consensus of what we think best case, not best case, but most likely scenario would be. And then we budget off of that conservatively. So while we might be optimistic about our enrollment, we don't want to budget optimistically. We want to budget conservatively that it's going to be a most likely scenario. So if you look at your enrollment numbers, get to that sheet here. The fall enrollment, so we're looking at fall of 2017, which would be this fall. 16, we realized 6,064. We budgeted at 6,100. So we didn't quite make the numbers from this last year. And then going into 17, we are predicting 6,165 enrollments. We are budgeting at 6,150 though. So we're being a little conservative about our numbers. We're predicting freshmen at 774, And if you look at 774, while we had 708 last year, 774 is a tick up, but it's not as high as the previous 3 years. And I'm going to have Dr. Lamb just give you a quick update. When we prepared these numbers were prepared months ago, and so we were kind of being careful about what our numbers are, but Dr. Lamb can give us the latest on what those freshman numbers look like.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, yes, as Dr. Foley said, we budgeted this, this estimated our freshman enrollment some months ago. Right now, we are at, let me tell you where we're actually at right now with the number of enrolled freshmen. As of this morning, we have enrolled 726 freshmen. We still have one early orientation program to go. That's today. And then we have our entire week of regular orientation and registration to go. And so we have already exceeded our freshman number from last year. If you carry this out, in other words, if we have an average year in terms of regular orientation and registration, and we don't know that we will, but if we do have an average year, our freshman number will be north around 800-ish. So it will exceed the estimate, but we still have a long way to go to get there.
That's what we needed, yeah. Unless anybody has questions. The other, go ahead.
Sorry, real quickly. So, substantial change seems like early on from last year to this year. What do you attribute that to?
Last year, what affected us was our staffing level, primarily in the fall of 15, which is the fall is really the heavy recruiting season for the following fall. We had a number of staff turnover and some staff out on FLMA and multiple, and we were down at one point to one recruiter on the road, myself helping, and which, you know, I'm not an effective recruiter, and our director helping with some of that. I think that was largely it. This past fall, we were fully staffed and on the road, and we're seeing really encouraging numbers.
From any particular locale?
Dallas-Fort Worth is still our strong. My sense right now, and I'll have to look a little more into the data, is we're doing a little better locally than we have in the past, but still driven largely by Dallas-Fort Worth.
So, Marilyn, let me point something out here. I've noticed a little footnote here that talks about this does not include Westford or Flower Mound, and so we're going to continue to bifurcate that for a year or so that we can see it stand alone. How is that going to work?
Right. My preference would be to keep it separate for quite a while.
Okay. Why is that?
Because I think you want it to be its own. You want to see how it's producing revenue and its expenditures net.
Right.
And if we mix it in, it's going to be more difficult to do that. We've been working very hard with Dr. Lamb's office and Chris Stovall and the registrar to be able to put those enrollments in our system in a way, in our enterprise resource system, to be able to extract the enrollments, the revenue, and expenses separately from everything else we're doing here on the Wichita Falls campus. Because we're investing in those operations, and you want to see what the return on investment is.
I agree with that. I guess my concern would be, I don't mind departmentalizing them.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't want to do is institutionalize them. In other words, create two separate institutions. It's not the purpose, and that's what I worry about. So we should monitor that. I mean, again, departmentalizing, no problem. But, you know, if we begin to look at that as a separate institution, I begin to worry.
Right. Yeah,
Okay?
I agree.
So, okay.
I think I would like to be able to say it's a net profit, that the net income is positive
Right.
from those operations, and once you get to that point, then you could folded in, because you know that it's not costing the institution anything. It's a plus to the institution in that case it's going to be part of the institution.
Okay.
But to Sean's point, for reporting purposes to the state, it would still be reflective of our
Yes.
overall enrollment and growth. And
Absolutely.
And that's what I want to be careful about.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
No, it's not.
Because if I look, as I look at these numbers, I look out to 2022, I'd like to know how big is the entire institution going to be. I mean, if I look at
Great point.
6953 and I see, that we're pushing 7,000 students in 2022, oh wait, that doesn't include Flower Mound, which is probably another, 800 students, 900 students? And I just want to make sure that I understand as a regent where we're headed
Okay.
as a whole. That's what I'm trying to drive home.
And I think, Dr. Lynn, you can talk about it, but I think once we get this first fall under our belt and kind of see, and we have a couple, and then we go from there for a few years. Right now, we're really don't have anything to base our numbers on. I mean, we're looking at what's possible,
Right.
but until we actually get the enrollments there and get classes going.
Right.
Our enrollment reports that will be submitted to you all in the fall, and then the ones that we submit to the coordinating board it'll be all folded in.
Well, I get all of that. I guess when we're looking at projections and models like this, I mean, my mind thinks about the institution, and that's what I'm trying to get to. I don't want, and I'm not trying to beat this down. I'm just trying to make sure that you understand going forward. I think the board would like to see where we headed as an institution as a whole. Because when I look at the Flower Mound numbers, I see 8,500 hours or 8,750 hours or 8,500 hours in 2022. I don't even know what that means as number of students. I mean, I can kind of cipher it, but I would like to easily pick it up and say, okay, this is what we're doing as a whole.
Okay.
This is how we're doing as a university. I'm okay with us doing it until we get to that profitability idea, but we still obviously want to keep it departmentalized. We want to make sure we understand that we're doing the right things in Flower Mound and Weatherford. But when I look at something like this, I want to see down the road where we headed as an institution.
Sure. Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Right now, I'm not sure it's predictable. We're predicting what's possible, but we don't have anything to base a prediction.
Well, I mean, that's fair, but we have projections and we understand. I mean,
Right.
The truth of the matter is, we don't know where we're headed with these numbers.
Well, we have a history to base it on.
We do,
Correlation to
but
base it
who's
on.
to say that something can change? I say, if we're saying that 8,500 semester hours is the case for Flower Mound Weatherford, then that's as good as we can do. And I agree, we don't have a history, but you know what? Let's put our best foot forward and figure it out.
Mhm. Okay.
But having said that,
Yeah.
we've gone all in on the Macroplex deal. We know how it's going. I mean, I get Sean's point, but we know how we're doing down there separately, I think, as well. So, both separately
Yeah, we'll be able to
and
do that. We'll
combination,
be able
yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
Mhm. But I understand what you're saying is in the future, we maybe should be folding it in with this. So.
Or at least in parts of it. I just want to make sure that I can pick up a snapshot and figure out how we're doing as an institution. Or how we're projecting to do as an institution. That's my
Okay,
concern.
okay. Good point. We can certainly do that.
Absolutely.
Okay. The other enrollment pieces, so the freshmen, again, the freshman is what we kind of base everything off of, and then the correlations. The correlations are, if you look at from one year to the next, so the beginning freshman and re-enrolling to the next year's enrolling is a 36 percentage point. So you take the two and you add them together, and then you look at the next year's re-enrolling freshman number. The same thing with sophomores. You're doing, you're taking the freshman, re-enrolling freshman and sophomore to the next year's, or rather to the next year's sophomore number is the 46%, and then sophomores to juniors, and then juniors to seniors. We did increase the correlation.
What's the definition of a re-enrolling freshman? Is that somebody that didn't accumulate enough hours in their first year?
Right.
And what number of hours
It's
is it?
30 hours. So if you didn't reach 30 hours, then you're still considered a freshman.
Okay.
And you might have students coming in that are classified as sophomores. With the students taking a lot of dual enrollment and AP credit kind of thing, they can actually come in as a sophomore. So when we look at our starting student and what the 70% retention going into their second year, that doesn't necessarily tie to a class, because they can come in as a sophomore to a junior and get the 70% retention is their first year, right? So I know there's some questions about where you get the 70% retention, freshman retention number. Why is this only 36%? It's two different numbers, because the class isn't necessarily tied to when they come into the institution, how they move through the institution with classes. That makes sense. Okay.
Would it be appropriate for me to kind of give an overall where we're at relative to that 61?
Sure.
65?
Yeah.
So as of this morning, and we were visiting about new students a moment ago, same day comparison, so August 3rd of 17 compared to August 3rd of 16, and new students, so that is freshmen and transfer, we are 143 enrolled students ahead at this point than we were same day last year. In terms of overall enrollment, we are, as of August 2nd, so August 2nd of 17 compared to August 2nd of 16, we're 70 students ahead. And we are still one orientation down. If you compare the Wednesday to the Wednesday, because that's comparing it, if you want to get a little even more specific, we're 40 students ahead Wednesday to Wednesday, with one orientation down this year compared to last year. So we'll get a bump from that orientation.
So I heard giggles down here, but I get all that. I mean,
Thank
I'm
you.
a numbers guy. I
Thank
love
you.
that stuff.
Yeah, not everyone appreciates me.
I love that.
So I think we're tracking well towards making budget if we have an average year from here until census day.
Don't have an average year.
Well, I would prefer not to.
Better than average.
I'd prefer not to.
Marilyn, why do you not show growth in the freshmen from 19 to 22?
Again, being conservative, if you look at what we were 817, 813 prior years, so 810 seemed like a good number. We can always bump that number up. If we do 820 this year in freshmen, then we can go in and adjust these numbers because we achieved it, right? It's possible.
If we have, and again, not to those of you that know me know I'd like to be fairly modest on expectations, but if we have an average year or above average year, we'll exceed that 820.
So at that point, I think it would be very reasonable to increase future year freshman class size. But again, when we did this a few months ago, we were at a 708 freshman class. So to be conservative, we don't want to go too far up that range. The other thing we did on the correlations, if you notice, we did bump up the correlation percentages, except for the senior class, but the rest of these correlations, we bumped them up gradually over time because of the freshman initiative we're doing, retention initiatives, and learning communities, and all the efforts we're putting forward on improving our retention rates. So we're hoping that will affect these correlation rates. And if they do, and we get the good freshman enrollments like we're showing, we'll be at 7,000 before 2022, not including our academic expansion efforts. So it looks pretty positive that way. Okay. Any other questions on enrollment? Okay, so then the next page we go into the revenue projections, and we take that fall headcount number that we're looking at, and we break it out into semester credit hours. Semester credit hours is really kind of the the element that will drive enrollment calculations. Head count's kind of this overall number that people like to concentrate on, but it's really that the semester credit hours that is what you multiply times tuition rates and all that to get your total numbers. The fall in head count, we take that and we translate it into credit hours for the fall, and then we have a pretty good predictor of what that fall to spring will be, and then spring to summer, based on just the fall. Okay, so sometimes that number improves, sometimes it changes. Last year, our fall to spring number actually was much better than we had done in the past. This year, we kind of fell back to our regular percentages, and then summer didn't materialize as strong as we would have thought based on past year's predictions. So while it's not a perfect way to calculate it, it's kind of the way we do it for right now. So then based on the 152,000 credit hours we're predicting, we multiply it out with our tuition fees, and you can see we've got two groupings. One is kind of the general tuition and fees. Those are the tuition and fees that take care of that central budget that we talked about. And then the other fees, the instructional enhancement fees, student service fee, those kind of things, they are more specialized in what we can use that money for. It does affect the overall budget because sometimes we can put something that would normally be covered in the general institution onto one of those fees if appropriate, which helps out the general institution budget. But for the most part, those fees are dedicated to certain, like athletics. We can't necessarily take athletics and pay a faculty salary with it. So they're dedicated to what they were being charged for. And then below, you see below the line is change from prior year. So you can see based on the 6150 head count and the 152,000 semester credit hours, our net change in tuition and fees is $1,267,000, of which $1,050,000 we can use for the general institutional budgets. Okay, and then future years, just to give you some examples, and we'll talk about future years information a little later. We multiplied it out based on those head counts that we showed you in the previous enrollment model, just so you can see. And that would not include any rate increases, strictly enrollment increases. Okay?
The assumptions for state appropriations or state assistance is the same throughout this, is that correct? Based on the current year?
Right, so the appropriations is every 2 years, so we know what this year will be,
Right.
and we know what next year will be. 20 is still up in the air.
But we're just using the same.
Yeah, we're not including that.
And if we get better, based on what Dr. Shipley was saying earlier, then we can factor that in at time.
Yes, we would do a separate calculation on what we're predicting for like formula funding.
Okay.
Special items is always one of those that's kind of up in the air.
Right, no, I get it.
We can manage that. But formula, we can a lot of times kind of calculate that.
Okay.
Formula funding, while we could take our numbers and multiply it by the formula, as Dr. Shipley said, it's a pot, there's a certain size of the pie. And if other people's share of the pie gets bigger, then even though we multiply it out and say, oh, we think we're going to get an extra $1 million, if other people grew faster than us, then our share may actually go down. So we may not get the $1 million, we may only get 250,000.
Right.
So it's the size of the pie and how everybody else does in the state. So it's relative to how everybody else is doing too. So it's a little bit of a trick to do some estimates on.
No, I agree. I just wanted to make sure I understood how after this biennium we were coming up with the assumptions, and what we're doing is what I thought we were doing. It's just basing it on what we know today.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, the next page just gives you, again, the budgets that are centrally funded, including those paid from, and then I give you the list of things that are included in that centrally funded grouping, the source of funds for that. And then the comparisons that we use do not include self-funded operations such as the student service fee, union fee, rec fee, housing, food service, etc. So when we're talking about our numbers as we move forward, we're pretty much concentrating on that upper grouping. Okay. Now we get into the the heart of the budget. And this should be familiar to Shayla. She's been looking at this for a lot in the Budget Oversight Committee. We start off with where we ended FY17. FY17, we had a balanced budget, so we don't have to kind of make up anything from 17, which is a good thing. So we start off with having to cover last year's base budget shortage by 0. Then we look at our difference in our revenue. So again, off of that revenue projection sheet I just showed you, we include the different growth areas. We also included a little bit of an increase in indirect costs. We got a couple sizable grants awarded that were able to provide additional indirect cost recovery to the institution. And because our auxiliaries are predicted to do a little bit better next year, we'll also get a little bit more off of those auxiliaries, their administrative overhead to the institution. We have a little bit of a decrease in interest income. We've been using some of our cash. For example, for the parking lot that we just built, we went ahead and borrowed from our cash and are paying it back with the parking fee money. The fields, while we did a master lease, there were some pieces of that field project that we did out of our cash and then are paying back with that USF, that $6 USF fee. So there's a few kind of cash things we've done. We bought the house that will, once we sell that Taft house, we'll replace the money. But we've used our cash in some ways, so we're getting a little bit less in interest income. Vending's down a little bit. Bookstore, as students shop around and go online to get their books and look for the best deals, the bookstore isn't quite making as much income. So we took a little bit of a hit there for $127,000 in those 3 areas. And then, of course, the decrease in state appropriation that the president just discussed. So right off the bat, we're $694,000 to the bad, that we don't have more revenue. We actually have less revenue. And in order to address that, we looked at various budget reductions. So we've had a couple reorganizations, some retirees, some vacancies that we decided not to replace and to reorganize, and so that saved us a little over $100,000. And then we went through numerous different reductions and savings in the different divisions. So each division contributed to the reductions in their budgets and finding savings in their areas. In addition to that, we had additional campus-wide salary savings, so we slowed down our hiring intentionally, and so we know we'll have additional salary savings above what we budgeted for $232,000. It's estimated. We'll see. And then at the year end, we go through and sweep people's budgets. So if you give somebody $100, they're not going to spend $100. They'll spend $96.43. So they're going to leave a little bit of money on the table. A lot of times we let them carry that money forward if they have a good reason. But this year we are going to be a little more aggressive in sweeping people's funds that they leave on the table. So we estimate we'll get another couple $100,000 there. Then we get into the additional expenses. So at the end of that, basically we have $859,000 we can use in next year's budget, new funds that we could use in next year's budget. We have mandatory increases that we don't have much choice about. The costs are going to be there. The new mass comm edition is going to require additional supplies and utilities, estimated about $30,000. We added a second internal auditor this year, and we only budgeted half a year, so next year we're going to have to pick up the entire year for that salary, which is another $31,000. The dual use on the DFW faculty, I might have Dr. Johnson explain this a little bit, that we wanted to hire full-time faculty down there, even though the classes aren't there to justify a full-time faculty. Because, and I'll let him go into the academic reasons for that.
Sure. As we go through this, I guess the most effective way to grow it, in my view, is short term, if faculty are willing, is part of this you can build with overload money on the backs of faculty that are already here, build in the workload, and then hand that over. In the areas that we've selected for the DFW Metroplex, we're at capacity. Those, particularly the BAAS and the health sciences and education degrees that we intend to offer. So we're doing that kind of in reversal, but if you will, we're using part of the workload in DFW, and those are on the books and enrolling and doing well. Supplementing this new faculty's workload with the overload on the main campus. So relieving our adjunct overload demands on the main campus to finish out this workload. So kind of piecing it together in a little different way, but sparing some of the excessive burden on the faculty that we have here. So
we'll be adding a few full-time faculty that'll be shared between this campus and DFW. And then once DFW grows, the plan would be that faculty will shift 100% over to DFW.
Right, transition a whole lot that way.
But right now, the main campus has to pick up a little bit of that faculty salary. It costs a little bit more than the adjuncts and the overloads we were previously paying, but so we'll be picking up a percentage of that faculty salary, and then the DFW will pick up the balance of it. And again, as we move through and add more classes, that faculty will shift full time, and we'll go back to the old model, an adjunct overload, or maybe adding an additional faculty here to make up growth. But so that's a nice way to get full-time faculty because they're going to be a little more committed to their campus, and we're just trying to overload our current faculty.
Well, for all the accreditation demands, we were expected to hire enough full-time faculty to cover our offerings. So we want to make sure we do that, and we have not just SACs in this case, but departmental, particularly the health science ones, accrediting agencies that we have to comply with. So there's a number of masters in this that we have to address in hiring these faculty.
Yeah. Okay. So that's why we're adding the 44,000 right now, and hopefully that'll shift back over to DFW. That cost will go back over to DFW. So. Okay. Anybody any questions on that one? Health insurance and benefit cost increase is almost 300,000. Athletic scholarships, if we increase any kind of tuition or fee rate, we have to provide that additional scholarship money to athletics to cover the number of scholarships they give out. So that was another $72,000. Software maintenance and credit card increases, again, those are ones that we can't, if we want to keep using the software or using the credit card processing, we have to pay those additional costs. Faculty promotions, we had $97,000 worth of expenses for the faculty that were promoted this year. And then the Bolin Geoscience funding. This is a restricted account that with restricted funds, as I mentioned to you, sometimes they do affect our centralized budget. The geoscience funding is ending, so we have to take what was currently the faculty member that was currently getting paid on those restricted funds and transition them over to the institutional funding. And then we get into the high priority for administration. And these were items that almost all of these were recommended very strongly by the budget oversight. Their number one priority was to bring all of our staff up to minimum pay grade. If you remember, we did a compensation study, and all the positions were graded, and we created a new pay plan, and we put a limit on how much people could get as an increase last year at $5,000. So many of our staff, I won't say many, but a number of our staff, even with the $5,000, didn't bring them up to the minimum. So this year, the number one thing for the BOC was to make sure everybody's up to at least the minimum of their pay grade, and that cost about $100,000. We also wanted to give pay raises to faculty and staff, and we did a 1% right now. And then the staff compensation plan, the parity Parity is where you've got a minimum and a maximum for a salary range or a grade. And what we wanted to do is somebody who's been in a position for 10 years, they should be progressing along that minimum to maximum of the pay grade. So we took the midpoint, which should be 15 years. 30 years is the entire scope from minimum to maximum. 15 years is the midpoint. So in 2016, we looked at how long they'd been in the position and said, okay, then you should be progressed along that minimum to midpoint range. If they had 20 years, we still maxed them out at the midpoint, 15 years. And then we took that difference from what they were currently making to where they should be along that scale and divided it into 4 pieces. So this will be 1/4 of that parity adjustment. And the idea is we had a lot of compression. We had a lot of people that were making a minimum salary or very close to minimum. So they've been here 5, 10 years, and they're making as much or close to as much as somebody brand new coming in. So what we want to do is kind of move them along the scale and get some separation and ease that compression. It's a lot of money, so we're dividing it over several years. So that piece was not quite $100,000. The physics consortium shared payment, we don't have enough students that are majoring in physics to offer the degree solely on this campus, and there are several other campuses in the state that are like that. And the coordinating board requires a certain number of graduates every year in order to maintain that as a degree plan. So we've combined with several other campuses in the state to offer a shared degree. So we beam classes from our campus in the major to their campuses, and vice versa. They'll beam the classes here that they're teaching. So nobody has to take the whole burden of the entire major. But the students still can graduate from these various campuses with a physics degree. So when they take the class here, those institutions will pay us the tuition, and when our students take a class on another campus that's being deemed, then we pay them. And in the past, we haven't really budgeted that because it varies so much. And so now we want to budget a little bit of money there that maybe a little more, maybe a little less than what we need to pay, but at least there's a pot of money that can help pay those fees that we have to pay the other institutions.
Are we doing this in any other degree?
I don't believe so. I think physics is the
And
only
is this
one.
new?
It's been going on for quite a while. Like I said, I know there's several campuses that they're doing this. We all have to teach physics because physics is part of many degree plans. So we all have physics faculty members. So we just didn't want to have as many faculties when we needed to teach the entire major. So I think it's a very smart idea. The students that want to major in physics, they can come here, and we only have a handful that do it. They may have a handful, so it's a nice way to do a shared expense on the major.
What are the other universities that we do?
I know Tarleton, West Texas.
Clemson Basin?
It's 4 or 5 of us that are doing it.
Creative.
Yeah. The President's Office, the board software maintenance agreement, which you're all using, maybe, hopefully, starting to use. That software, that maintenance agreement, the DFW marketing, this is the piece that we're paying on our campus because we are marketing in DFW for this campus. The DFW campus is also picking up a chunk of marketing money that's advertising and marketing for the Flower Mound and Wise County campuses.
Was it part of that 150, or is that?
No, it's another. It's an additional fund out of that budget that's paying for that advertising. The paralegal, as you know, that's a compliance issue the board wanted to do. We added the extra internal auditor. This year we're adding some help for Barry with a paralegal for half a year, and in 19 then we'll be picking up the full salary on that position. So we've added a half a year. The grant coordinator, we were doing a contract almost $100,000 a year with a consulting firm out of Washington, D.C., and so they kind of ramped up our grant writing and our research into federal funds availability and programs that we would qualify for here on campus. we decided to stop doing that consulting contract and rather bring on somebody full-time here. So the person is, the position is currently a wage position, and we're converting it into a full-time position. So that's the $31,000. So it's not a full position cost, because some of the costs are already there as a waged position. And then the football stadium, that was a placeholder. At the very last minute, we got information that we might be increasing, there might be an increase on the cost to use the Wichita Falls ISD Stadium. And so we've inserted that as a placeholder. We weren't sure what the cost was going to be, because the negotiation was just starting. So that was a placeholder, and I don't know, Dr. Shipley, if you're going to talk about that.
In executive session.
So total new expenses were $1.5 million, and so we're a little bit short, because we only had the $859,000 available. So, as Dr. Shipley mentioned, we're going to use some one-time funds that we consciously saved this year in order to help pay for that. The cut in the appropriations came so late, literally the last week of May is when we found out what our numbers were going to be. So rather than do something, shoot from the hip as far as how to cut some things we would do, or reductions that we would do, or scenarios we could run in order to have a balanced budget to you, we thought the more prudent thing was to be very careful with the funds, carry forward funds to cover next year, and then take next year to really see how DFW is doing, see how our enrollment comes out, and then make some better decisions on 19 and have a balanced budget to you in 19. So that was our strategy to cover 18's budget. So we came up with over $600,000, almost $650,000, to cover what we predict is going to be a shortfall in the balanced budget this year. Any questions? Covered a lot.
So I've got a mechanical question. As I look at this, grinding through it, it's clear to me that what we're doing here, and I really appreciate this, I think it really helps a lot. The one concern that I do have is this is clearly not an overarching budget reconciliation. It's just local. And I wouldn't mind seeing in the future something that is an overarching budget reconciliation year over year. Okay? Because again, as I began to look at this, I realized very quickly that only certain revenues are in here. And the question I had earlier about state funding really wasn't covered on that page. It's covered here. Okay? And so I'd like to see something that goes from 17 full budget to 18 full budget. And in addition to that, the comment you made about certain of the revenues are applicable only to certain things. If, in fact, we had an overarching reconciliation, we wouldn't have to worry about that. You could just take this $1,267,000, bring it over here, and just start working from it.
Okay.
Okay? That would be helpful for me, because I just spent a lot of time just kind of working my way through this, trying to figure, and I finally got it. And I think the real story here is at the bottom of this page. How are you going to pay for this?
Right.
And so what I would like to see is just an overarching reconciliation of the whole budget, and then roll forward from there.
Okay.
That's just me.
Okay.
I don't know what the rest of the board feels, but that's just me.
I agree.
I think this is hard.
It facilitates the transfer of information, I think, from you guys to us, just so we can easily disseminate.
Okay.
But this is very good. I mean, I love the detail. I love the explanations. It just add that, and I think we're perfect.
Okay. So by fund group, because we have appropriations, we have designated funds,
Yeah.
or some of, we
I
have
mean,
auxiliaries,
Yeah.
restricted.
I wouldn't call it by fund group as much as I would just overall budget. Okay, just overall. Because, when we see financial statements, we see total revenues, total expenses. Just start there,
Okay.
and then push it forward.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions?
Can you tell me what the facilities chargeback maintenance fund, that $150,000, what is that?
So what the facilities does is when they do a non-ENG assignment, so auxiliaries comes and says, I need this area painted, and we take our facilities painters that are paid on state funds and go use them over in facilities or over in auxiliaries to paint something, we have to charge that entity for their time because they're getting paid on state dollars and it's an auxiliary. So they'll charge them for that, and we'll put that in a pot, and sometimes the pot will pay people, sometimes it pays parts, paint, whatever. But it's filled up a little bit of funds. There was $300,000 in that pot, and so I felt like it was okay to take about 150, take half of it. And a lot of times Kyle will use that in case there's an emergency of some sort, needs a piece of equipment, he's used up all his heat. That's a nice pad for him to go to take care of any emergencies, kind of thing. So he had plenty of money in that fund, so we're using half of it to kind of help out.
So how many other funds are sitting around here that we don't know about that
We pretty much went through most of them. Yeah, it was for plant operations. I mean, for him to be able to make repairs or maintenance in case something happens. But I think 300 was healthy.
It is part of the budget. I mean,
right, everything's in the budget.
Marilyn, I'm assuming reading this that we're saying that donations are going to stay flat. Is that a correct assumption?
Right.
Okay. But then this $50,000 for a gift popped up here. What?
That was a gift that had been, I don't want to say how long had it been there, a year or two?
2015.
Yeah. So it's to be used for faculty salaries, and it's one-time money. So we're using it to help pay for a faculty salary this year. And so it doesn't have to be on the central budget. The gift can be used to do that. Any other comments or questions? Okay. So as I mentioned, if you turn the page, we've got predictions then of FY19 and FY20. So as an institution, we try to look at multi-year. We just don't focus on this year, but we look at the impact in future years on decisions we're making today. So we try to take a strategic perspective. So just to kind of keep mindful of what we're doing today, how it's going to impact future years. So again, we start out 18, we needed to use about $650,000 of one-time monies to balance the budget. So number one in 19 is we need to address that and take care of that. And then in 19, our projected revenue, that was based on that other page you just saw of enrollment, and our predicted revenues based on our enrollment projections is another $1 million. So we'll have about $400,000 of new funds available if nothing else changes. And then we know there's going to be some mandatory expenses in 19. We've got several restricted funds that again they're going to be starting to roll off, and we need to institutionalize those expenses. And then we've got the new HSH building coming online in 19 that we'll have to pay for its utilities and maintenance, custodial, that kind of thing. We've got a scholarship commitment ending. Again, that's a restricted fund that we'll have to be taking on institutionalizing it. We did some savings this year. One of our savings was to cut Debbie's budget for $10,000 because she didn't need to travel to the legislature this year. Or she didn't need to do it as much as she did in previous years. So next year, as we go into another legislative session, we'll have to put that money back into her account. There's your other half a year of the paralegal. Our health insurance costs, we're estimating at $200,000. Longevity is mandatory by the state. Software maintenance agreements, just estimating another $70,000, and faculty promotions of about $80,000. So total, we'll have not quite $900,000. which means we need to find $500,000 to balance next year.
Marilyn, I got a question.
Uh-huh.
If we're gonna cover that 641,049 with 646,000 of one-time funds that we've made available in 17, why are we carrying it over to 19? I'm confused by that.
It's a base budget. So the base budget of people's salaries and M&O and that kind of thing continues into the next year.
So there's not any one-times in this, it's all
Right.
carryover.
Right, so
Right.
we want ongoing revenues to cover our ongoing expenses.
It's a bridge.
So that money will go back to reserves?
This money over here,
Six 41.
No,
the
No, it's
641, we have to find new revenues or new reductions in order to cover
Are
the
we-
641, because we're only covering it for the 1 year.
have we scrubbed expenses just to make sure that everything's carryover? I mean, it seems like there could be some potential for one-times that are buried in there. I'd be curious to know if we've done any scrubbing of that number.
We really looked at those this year.
Okay.
Of what could be considered one time.
Okay, all right. It's fair. Okay, I get it. I'm sorry.
I mean, we will go back and look again.
I just think in a $100 million budget, there's gotta be some things that are one-timers and, aren't necessarily carrying over. So I would suggest that we go do that, but I do
And
get
we
it.
try to document that
Sure.
when we put the budget together, when like the BOC says, yeah, give them that money one time.
Yeah.
We try to document, okay, that's only one time. And, the following year, they're not getting the money again. Because of course, they'll expect, oh, don't I get that every year? And you'll say, no, it was just 1 year you got it. So we try to very carefully
Well,
document.
I'll give you an example. So I look at this DFW marketing at 150. I would presume that we're gonna have marketing every year, but are we gonna have that to that intensity as we roll out MSU Texas? Is it gonna be ongoing? That's the question I would have. That's the sort of thing I would look at.
And it's likely it will be. We were way behind in marketing. We really
I agree with that.
had to make an investment.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. But
It's
that's,
probably gonna be ongoing.
but that's the exercise that I think we should go through is be looking at that, be intensely looking at that and scrubbing it out. And Suzanne, to your point, I absolutely agree with you. We're way behind the 8 ball in marketing. Because I gotta tell you a story. Walking downtown, Tarleton State's banners are all over Fort Worth.
Yeah.
Their president's picture is all over Fort Worth.
I'm prettier than he is.
You are hugely prettier.
So then going into 20, the good news is in 20, if we can cover the 458 in 19 and have a balanced budget in 19, which I'm committing to you, that's our goal, is to have a balanced budget going into 19. In 20, then we don't have to cover anything. Again, it will be starting at 0, and we'll have our new revenue coming through with enrollment growth. Again, no rate increases, just the enrollment growth. And then we've got our mandatory expenses, which are not quite the 851. So we actually have about $200,000 of additional funds we could use on strategic initiatives, strategic priorities. So we get through next year, 20 is looking pretty good. And again, to your point, Sean, that 20 is appropriation. So appropriations can go up or down. Okay.
Are we gonna continue to budget $200,000 for health insurance costs for the rest of our natural born days?
This year, health insurance went up 2%. They used some reserves, ERS, Employees Retirement System of Texas, which is what we get our health insurance from. And we're mandated to do that. We can't go out and try to find our own insurance. We have to do whatever the state tells us to do. They used some of their reserves this year to keep the costs down to the different agencies. They did switch from United to Blue Cross Blue Shield, so they did make a change in the provider. So in my presentation this afternoon, you'll be able to see the cost of benefit increases compared to the cost of our salary increases. It's pretty dramatic what we're spending on benefits over the last
Well,
estimated increase.
I suppose it's some sort of comment on the overall national thing on healthcare that's so difficult to get a handle on, but that's just really depressing.
The other piece, it's not just the cost of the health insurance, but we have to pick up the retirees. And so as health insurance becomes more costly and difficult to obtain, we have a lot of retirees that may have been here 20 years ago and put their 10 years in, and now they've reached the age. So they may not even have been employed here for the last 20 years, but because they did at least 10 years here, they can come back and get insurance, retiree insurance on us.
We pay 100% of that.
We would pay like an employee. So what we contribute to an employee right now to their health insurance is the same thing we would do for a retiree. So it's just themselves, they get 100% paid for, but if you have a spouse or family, then we contribute the same as if they were employed by us.
Marilyn, I'm reading this right to say the reasonable closure at 2020 is dependent upon the growth in enrollment to almost 6,600.
Right.
So we need that's almost 10% from where we are in 2016.
And this does not include any rate increases, tuition or fee rate increases. We did do a little bit of a rate increase for that designated tuition for new students coming in, just to kind of keep up with inflation. We did a little bit there, but there are no other rate increases.
So with 3 years, we need to be seeing something like 3 to 4% growth this year, 3 to 4% next year in the enrollment for this to balance. Otherwise, we had to go back and
this
look at
does
things.
not include any net profit from the DFW operation.
Which, if you look at the number, you'll get to it here. Never mind.
Net income from that operation.
So we've got about 30 minutes left.
Okay.
Now
20.
Okay, well, I'm almost through. So HEAP is, we get an appropriation from the state on higher education assistance fund, which is used for capital purposes. It's a set amount for 5 years. So we got our $5,061,000 decided on last year. So we keep that for 5 years. So last year, this year, and 3 more years going into the future. And then it's a formula calculated amount that we get, and so like I said, in 5 years they will be recalculating that, and we could go up or down. So the first chunk of that money is on debt service, and we've got a lot of master leases that we're paying for equipment that you can see the debt service. The big $900,000 was all master lease. The mass communication is for the equipment that you'll see the tour today of what that purchased on a master lease. Ligon is for the renovations over at Ligon in an area that we use also for instructional purposes. We have some vehicles. The MassCom, again, is the equipment lease. So the debt service on the MassCom, was the building cost, and then the furniture and equipment is on a separate lease. And then the flour mill, we've gone ahead and estimated what it's going to cost to furnish and equip that operation. Physical plant, we've got 3 areas of regular, kind of about the same amount we appropriate this fund every year. Physical plant's about $1 million. Library is a little more than $500,000, and then the colleges get about $400,000 a year. That the provost works with them to kind of divvy it up among the colleges. One of the big things we did this year is the BOC really wanted to put some money into technology. So we did a few things that are really high priority for us. One is to get the classroom technology improved and up to speed. Dillard especially is 10 years old, and the units over there are very expensive to replace. And we've been kind of kicking the can down the road because it is so expensive. So the BOC decided they really wanted to help take care of that issue this year. One of the other things that we decided to do this year is the computer life cycle replacement. Right now, if you're in a college or an apartment and you need a new computer, you had to go up the chain and say, can I please buy a new computer? and they would scramble around and try to find money to get you a new computer. What we'd like to do is move to a more centralized process where IT takes an inventory of everybody's computer, and we try to get on a life cycle replacement of every 5 years. You will get either a new laptop or desktop, your choice. And so we'll centrally fund that, so there's no more scrambling around, and the rich get a new computer every 2 or 3 years, and the places that don't have money get one every 10, you know, and only when it crashes. So we're trying to do that from a centralized budget. The other thing that I think is high priority and that you should take note of is the disaster recovery. So when I took over IT, as you might know, there was audit findings for our server being in an old barracks. And so we're doing a couple of good things. One is we're going to move those servers to a much more secure location in the new HSH building that's going to be designed for servers to protect those servers. The other thing is a disaster recovery. Right now we back up the data, but there's nowhere that we can run that data on if those servers get destroyed in a tornado or whatever. So we're going to create a disaster recovery site in Flower Mound that all of our information, there'll be servers there that can run our enterprise systems, and we can have our data backed up there at a remote site. And that's typical. That's what most places do. So that will help us with our risk management, and super important. So that's going to be a little bit of money.
Have we looked at this, what I think is kind of a state facility?
We did, and it's very expensive.
Too expensive
to do that. This is a much cheaper option, and we need to run our enterprise system there anyway. The other option is cloud computing, but again, that's a very expensive option, and you're kind of at the, I don't want to say at the whim, but you have to pay your provider money, just like that software maintenance goes up every year. Then you're kind of in their beck and call, whatever they want to increase it every year. Then you're kind of stuck. You got to keep paying it. We're in a little bit more control when we run our own servers. So, we're going to look at electronic signatures. That's another efficiency that we can stop pushing paper this year. The other things we're doing are we're going to have a working reserve of about $185,000. So things pop up all the time, and that gives us a little bit of reserve to work with if something happens we need extra money from. The fine arts thing. Fine arts has been really, I think the students and the dean and the faculty over there should be very happy. They've got the mass comm. The space that they've vacated is being renovated for music. So music is also on a short shift over there, and now they're going to have a very nice space, and you'll see that today. We've also done the ADA and fire marshal, so they're going to have a nice renovation of their facility to get it up to standards for ADA and the fire marshal. And then these funds here will work on some of the art areas for their ventilation, which was in need of that. So Fane at the end of the day, at the end of this year, should be in really pretty good shape. So there's the full $5 million. Any questions on the heat? Again, BOC, these were the recommendations BOC made, and I think they were very well received by everyone, and everybody's pleased with the outcome.
Marilyn, remind me, okay, the library renovation we're going to vote on, okay, won't have any impact on this whatsoever in the future.
Right, that's going to be in the TRB,
right.
Tuition revenue.
Right.
The next sheet just shows you, kind of speaking to other sources of funds at the institution. About $20 million of our budget is from restricted funds. So this shows you the sources of those funds and then how they get spent. So a large chunk of it comes from the federal government for student financial aid. Another chunk comes from the state for Texas grants, another form of financial aid. Pretty Foundation is showing up this year. Again, a nice amount from that $1 million is for scholarships. And we've got miscellaneous gifts of almost $200,000. Again, a lot goes to student aid, student financial aid. Any questions on that sheet? Okay, the the final sheet is on the academic expansion budget. And these are, and again, I might have Dr. Lamb come up and explain this. He's going to do an update for you during the regular board meeting. But we worked very closely with him to put these projections in the budget together. We're estimating, based on the enrollment of about $1 million in revenue, and then expenses of about $1.1 million. The lease and the build out for the building there has been a little delayed, and so we're not paying a full year of rental lease on the facility, which really helps our bottom line, because that cost has gone way down from what we first estimated. So I don't know if you want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. As Dr. Foley mentioned earlier, it's somewhat of a moving target trying to predict what we're going to see there until we have a cycle or two that we can pull from. With that, what we did is we took the classes that we're offering this fall, spring, and summer, and we estimated enrollment on those. We feel fairly conservatively. Some classes we estimated 0 enrollment. Some classes we estimated between 35% and 45% enrollment of the capacity. So we went fairly conservative. That cranked out 35, 37 semester credit hours. In terms of head count, again, it depends on how many hours each student takes, but a part-time student, that's going to average about 130 heads per semester. But you will see less heads at first and more heads later as we add classes through the year. But that would be the average. Yeah, so you can work your way through there, and you can see the estimated lease, the estimated build-out cost, which is our share of the build-out with the developer. The $150,000 in marketing that Dr. Foley mentioned earlier, that's specific to Flower Mound, and then our faculty and our staff costs, an estimate on what we would need for maintenance and operations. And scholarships is an estimate based on what we award to students in Wichita Falls. We don't know if that number, if we'll actually realize that more or less. So we'll adjust that as we move forward. But net income, as you can see, about negative $105,000. When we first started on this project, we assumed we would have a negative net income for about 3 years. And so this is looking a little more promising than that, but again, just caution that we still have to go through the exercise and see what we actually enroll and adjust from there.
Okay. And that's it. How did I do on time?
Good job.
One more question, I'm sorry. On the page before this, it may be something you want to reserve to tomorrow, but the $9 million for U.S. Department of Education, part of that's the Pell Grants, and we're critically dependent on that. Do we see any, maybe that's for tomorrow, a discussion of whether that will change or there's any, the Trump administration?
I think the word on the street is that they are going to go back and change allowing Pell for the summer, which is why we dropped so dramatically our summer, because students didn't have any financial aid. But you're with financial aid.
Right, that's absolutely right. At this point in time, there have been no policies or changes put forth that would decrease that. What we are hearing, as Dr. Foley said, is that there may be a reinstatement of summer Pell, which would help quite a bit and would grow that number. And again, that number, the Pell number will change depending on enrollment. So the greater the enrollment, the greater that number will be.
But you don't see any political waves right now, hear anything coming up that's going to affect that? Okay.
The biggest, well, Keith, the biggest impact we struggled with was the impact on international enrollment, and across the country that's down. And so Keith, at our last board meeting, mentioned that we were making inroads into countries more likely to come, because we thought we'd see Melton, the Chinese group, and others.
Absolutely. Do you want me to address that a little more? So, yeah, that has been our concern is international enrollment, which is about 10% of our enrollment. And we are seeing an increase in denied visas From certain regions of the world, we're seeing, I think we discussed this last time, increased reticence from certain parts of the world for coming here because of both the rhetoric that they see, but also because there is discussion of reducing the number of H-1Bs awarded every year, and of course a number of these students desire to stay in the U.S. and work on an H-1B, and as they see their chances potentially diminish of that they are rerouting to other countries such as Canada, the UK, and Australia. With that, Dr. Shipley's absolutely right. We've doubled down in regions of the country that regions of the world we're very familiar with. We should see a nice increase this year from the Bahamas, from certain parts of the Caribbean. China, we actually realized some students for our Intensive English Language Institute, about 18 from China this summer, that will matriculate in the fall, which is better than we thought we would do from there, without question. So our international numbers will be lower, but I don't think it's going to be as bad as we thought in February, because we are getting a little bounce in the Caribbean and the Bahamas.
What about online? Are we doing anything to, I didn't see budget for that particularly or anything. Is that something we're not emphasizing? Since it is, what percent of the population is currently online?
And I'm going to give you some round numbers, but any given year, about 17 to 19% of our students are exclusively online. That has been growing the last couple of years, our online only enrollment. I believe that is separated out in the summer numbers that we will look at later, and if the board's request, we've begun separating those out for our enrollment reports. To answer your question directly on what are we doing for marketing for online, I'll have to look at that. That would be with another office, and I'll need to look and see what they're doing specifically, and I can let you know.
Okay, because I'm seeing a big growth from where I look in the University of Phoenix, the West Texas Governors. I mean, and it's becoming something that people brag about now, having a degree from an online university. I see that as a major competition that I don't see addressed in the budget.
Part of those in Flower Mound in particular, we'll maybe to address a bit more later, but we're piloting there to work out the bugs, and then look at the main campuses. Parts of term, particularly with online, allows us to move through at an accelerated rate. So what that means, we're taking a long semester and we're dividing into 8-week. So you have one that runs the long semester, one class that runs 16 weeks, one that runs the first 8 weeks, one that runs the second 8 weeks. So that takes a half-time student to a 3/4 time student. So the number of students that we turn away in some of these completion degrees, these online completion degrees, we can now move them through faster, serve more in any given time. But there's some challenges in terms of course, in the business office and financial aid offerings, the logistics in our learning management system. So there were a number of things that we need to work out. I certainly want to do that in a smaller population in Flower Mound and then move that out to the main campus. So we have certainly the capacity to do that. I will be working with the deans and department chairs over the coming year to look at targeted programs where we have capacity. Keith and I have been talking about strategic recruiting and putting them into these programs, but they are popular. We do have a number of them online, and we just want to be very strategic in how we add and roll out new online degree programs. But,
well, as a comment, it's almost 20% of our population, but it's not even mentioned in the budget, and it seems like an area that we're not giving sufficient emphasis to, and I think we're ignoring the competition. So I'd like for you to think about
the other side of increasing our capacity or ability to deliver online is the infrastructure to do it. So that the staff and the technology,
it's expensive.
Very expensive.
It's expensive.
And the technician side of that to help and support the faculty in doing that. But yes, it's certainly a market to continue to expand and grow it.
Dr. Foley, why don't you explain why it's not in the budget? We separated it out for a reason.
Right, there's many students that'll they're here on campus and they'll still sign up for an online class. So unlike the DFW, where we've broken it out, it's a little bit more difficult to extract. You know, we have to go class by class of what's online, and then you have to go student by student of who's only taking online classes that are maybe on the campus. So it's really commingled very much with our regular offerings.
But also the state, how does the state recognize online?
The state does give you formula funding for it. They made an adjustment this last formula period. We have two basic formulas. One is our instructional formula and one is our infrastructure formula. And they began to recognize that a lot of places had a lot of online classes and that you don't need to have space for those online classes. So any of the online classes only got half of what they currently got as far as funding for infrastructure. So we lost a little bit of money on our infrastructure because we're offering so many online classes.
But it's a highly profitable endeavor for us, not from the state funding, but it's highly profitable because they're not on campus.
So I want to add something to what Linwood's saying, because I concur, but I am not as concerned because I think the commingling aspect of it is something important, but I do think it's important, as Linwood pointed out, that we as a board understand how much of an offering we have. I'm not as concerned as others may be about the number of students. I'm more concerned about the number of classes and hours that we're offering out there online so that we can get a handle on that profitability. That's key.
Okay. We can break out some reporting on that. Any other questions?
If
I'm
not,
pretty good.
Very nicely done, Dr. Fuller. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for all that discussion. We'll now recess for our tour and lunch break. For those of you going on the tour, buses behind Hardens to take us across campus. We'll reconvene our meeting here at 1:30. All right. The meeting of the Committee of the Whole will now resume. Regent Burks is or has joined us by phone. Tiffany, you there?
I'm here. Good afternoon, everyone.
Well, hello.
Here.
Welcome.
See a volume button. Thank you, Kevin.
See how technical?
That sounded a little defensive.
Can you hear us now? I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Thanks to Calvin.
Okay. Thanks to Kevin's technical ability.
Definitely defensive.
I hate when I'm not there. I know I'm always missing something.
Everybody was talking about it.
No, okay.
Well, item 17-112, the investment overview. It's time for a yearly visit and update from Kevin McGinnis with the Texas A&M University System. Mr. McGinnis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Always appreciate coming and visiting with y'all. First question of business is, where's the salmon and the food y'all were talking about?
Downtown at McBride's.
McBride's downtown.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as y'all know, we have every year, let me see if I can just, I'll pull this up. We come and discuss how the investments have been doing, and slideshows. There. And what is happening in the world of our investments at the A&M system. As you'll see, we have two accounts, and most of you all probably heard me before. For those of you who have not, we manage your cash operating funds, and we manage your endowment funds. By way of a law in the state of Texas, that if you have over a certain amount, you can then manage for other institutions. So we manage for y'all, we manage for Stephen F. Austin, and we manage for Texas Women's. So those are the three so far. Others have talked to us, but we've not made headway yet. Normally we come to you, and when you see a year like this where we're up 10%, we will normally lag the index when that happens. Just so happens this year we beat the index. Really strong markets, 10% is strong for this fund. You usually lag the index, because the reason it's strong is because the market is going so strongly that an active manager, who usually picks and chooses stocks, gets run over by the momentum. In this case, we did have a good year, continuing our long-term track record of having good years. Our allocation, I've told you before that we're not market timers. We have an allocation the board provides us, and we work within that allocation. That doesn't mean that within domestic equity we cannot shift amongst managers, but it does mean that on domestic equity we're going to be pretty much on top of our board's policy. We're not in this to bet tomorrow on pork bellies and then switch to something else the day after. Absolute return is hedge fund, anything that's seeking to make an absolute return. I'll talk a little bit more of a couple of our managers here in a little while, more in depth than I have in the past. But there you see our allocation. If you have this, they emailed it out hard copy. That date I think was wrong. It said 6/30 of 16, so I fixed that. Apologize for that. Midwestern State Operating Funds. Y'all came to us with $24 million. Right now that $24 million has been added back to it, 2.9. You have unrealized appreciation in there of 1.8 for a total market value in June of $28.8 million. Your daily cash, of course, is handled by Maryland, handled through y'all. This is more of your longer-term asset. So we've added to those assets as we've gone along since October 13 to June 17. System Endowment Fund is the other account we have. The endowments to provide continuing and long-term payout, dependable, where the person holding the chair of the scholarship knows they're going to get that money year after year. And then, of course, we want to increase that value as time goes on. Once again, you'll see, and this kind of held true from the other side, we good year, we lag the index a little bit. That's what we expected to see on the other side. Lag the index a little bit, continued long-term strong return. Kind of a broken record, but we are also not market timers here. You will see some variances. I found the pointer on accident, but you look at real assets, 15 to 10, private equity, 15 to 19. When you get into these private assets down here, you can't always time that dollar as well. You can time a dollar in the stock market daily. When you're in a private equity investment, they may put the money to work tomorrow, they may put the money to work down the road. The growth rate of that money could fluctuate, liquidation effects, all those sort of things. So these will change on the margin. I'll touch on a few things we're doing currently. Real assets includes timber, real estate, and energy. We're not having a problem finding energy investments right now, but we don't want to be 100% exposed to the energy markets in that area. So we have for some time, we had timber a few years ago. Timber, everybody says, you know, if the market's not going, the tree's growing, so it's realizing more value. We broke even on our timber investments, but they were not an area that we made a whole lot of money in. So we are currently actively, I was in Chicago last week looking for real estate managers. We're probably going to add 2 in the next 3 or 4 months. Diversified, opportunistic, kind of look for. We have met with some that are more region specific. We don't want to be exposed to, say, the Dallas real estate market. We wanted a diversified approach. So we will be looking to increase that number as time goes on. We have $12 million. Market value has gone up a little bit since y'all have been in. Units, I'll come back to this in the next slide, but basically our payout is determined by units, just like a mutual fund. As you buy units in the fund, it pays out based on the unit. And the quarterly payout is calculated on an annual basis, 20 quarter fiscal quarters, ending previous February, multiplied times 5%. So let's say we have a 5% payout, that's 5% of a history of quarters. What that does is it causes us to be able to increase spending, and if y'all have been here for the last couple of years, we did have a few where it went down. We now have 2014 as our bottom, and this is where our payout is going, and that's per unit in the fund. So once again, if I'm a shareholder, I can count on the fact that my spending is going to keep track, hopefully with inflation, and increase through time. Investment pool comparisons. This is just a slide that we put in here to compare kind of the risk parameters of both. Obviously, we do not believe our long-term assets on our operating side are anything to be contracted out with 7, 8, 10, 12 years, but we do believe that on this side. We also do not really invest anything short-term on the endowment side. When it comes time to make a distribution for income, we will either use some of the donations that come in, make that trade out, or we will call one of our managers that happens to be holding a little bit of cash and get that cash from them. But you'll see the different risk parameters of the two shown here. Very similar in equities, heavier in fixed here because it is a long-term core asset, lighter in fixed here. And then absolute return crosses the board. Any questions on that? Last slide, this is a new slide. And I'm going to step a little bit in your way because I can't see from there. This is just some of our managers. And typically we look for our managers to be in the top quartile in a 5-year period. I'll touch on a few. Jennison is our longest term manager. We hired them in 1995, and they have not always been top quartile. They have been third quartile at times. But we have proven with them, they've proven to us, if we're patient, they always reserve, cream always rises to the top. So that's one of our longest term managers, Hayden Regal and Bradford and Marzak. These two firms, fixed incomes, as they say, fixed income's somewhat boring, but if you can add 1.5% to a 2.3% index, that's pretty good. I'll give you a little sidebar on Bradford and Marzak. Our concern of them since 1995, because they were, politically say this, I'm over 50 now, so I can say it, elderly, was transition, and it was always one of those things we're always sitting there going, who's the next generation? Well, they recently sold to a totally unrelated firm. So we're watching them. As long as the numbers continue, as long as the staff that's been doing the management continues, but if we see some of the guys that we've known for a long time start jumping ship, we will probably move deeper into a relationship with Peyton Regal, who is a very large firm, $50 billion in management. Let's see what else I can find. Altrinsic, if y'all had seen these numbers for the past couple of years, they were lagging. They have done very well over the last 2 years. Still second quartile for 5, but considering they were fourth quartile for a while, they've come a long ways, and something that it's paid off for us to be patient with. You'll see all the managers, the new manager there, third quartile, not putting a whole lot of stake on that. And I told you I'd talk about our absolute return managers. All of our absolute return managers are beating their hedge fund index, but they're all in the second, third quartile. They are fairly conservative. We're not looking for one long short equity manager that's going to knock the doors off one day and lose it the next. These are very well diversified. So we don't expect to be, we expect to be second quartile bump and top quartile. But when you get into flows, this is kind of where we expect these people to be. Once again, some changes in the market would certainly let you make more money in absolute return, but as of now, it's doing what we expect it to do. Any questions? Aggies aren't going to be any good this year if that's one of the
Did BlackRock just create that account for you guys?
Well, all three of these, these two are separate funds, yes.
Oh, I missed the one above it, yeah.
Okay. So what happened is we were with BlackRock, and we were actually with the predecessor of this firm. I'll tell you a sad story how you lose a multi-billion-dollar firm overnight. But we were with a predecessor called Common Sense, and you're going to realize why that's an oxymoron there in a second. And we were in their normal funds. Well, their normal funds are very, very diversified because they have everybody from endowments like us who have substantial assets to mom and pops to network families, all that sort of thing. So what we looked at them and said, okay, what if you took, instead of your 30 best ideas, come down to your top 15 and ran a more concentrated portfolio just for us. And so that's where we ended up with these two portfolios. And BlackRock's is more of a completely diversified, managed out of Seattle. Used to be Quellos before it became BlackRock. Very diversified approach. We just took that and kept the diversification amongst the categories, but lowered the number of managers for impact.
And they're just doing that on a separate account basis?
Right, separate account basis. And then ABS is, for the most part, a long-short fund. And so they'll have long-short macro, they'll have long-short international, they'll have everything from a book that's 80% long to a book that's 40% short. And so they create that for us. The out-of-school story on that is Common Sense literally went under from I think it was $5 billion management firm to zero because the head of the Common Sense, who told you how much common sense he had, got caught in a house of ill repute in Portland, Oregon.
Oops.
And so that was the funny joke on Bloomberg. Common Sense does not have much common sense. They were a good manager. We didn't work with him a lot. We worked with his staff, great staff, and they all lost their jobs too, so it's a tragedy. But ABS is out of Connecticut. They've done a very good job for us and picked it up and started running.
How many times during the year do you review the portfolio?
Well, we review the portfolio every month when we get our reports. We actually meet with every manager on this page, and this is the small number. The bigger number is all the private equity and real asset managers that we have. We meet with every manager at least twice a year. Once in our office, once in their office. So there's 37 of them now. So we travel a lot. Luckily, you have centers in New York. You can get a bunch of them done in a week. things of that nature. But we meet with every one of them. We review it with our board once a year. We review it with our consultant quarterly, and then internally we are kind of nerdy about it. So, questions?
Does forecast still look good? I mean, obviously it was a good year.
It was a good year. You know, I will tell you that our biggest concern is the same thing y'all see every morning in the news, and what's Washington going to do? What's the effect of President Trump? You know, for all the good ideas he may have, he always has something that catches everybody off guard. You know, we're flying planes over the east now, and it's like, that's the thing that concerns us the most. The economy is we think, going to continue to click along. We've been saying for, well, at least since 2008, when the crisis, that we're going to see inflation. Still haven't seen inflation. I mean, you know, maybe this is the new norm, and the fact that I caught the end of the 80s when I was growing up, this inflation like crazy, maybe this is the norm, and we just all assumed that would come back. So inflation concerns us a little bit, primarily because while they are low yields now for our fixed income managers can allocate and beat the index. Once those yields start heading up, it's going to be hard to make any money on fixed income when you're going off a 2% return. So I would say the biggest thing is what we all see every day, is will we have a government that continues to function normally? And some of us, was a political science major before I became an economics major. Some of us think the best time in our government is when there's chaos and nothing can get done. The economy takes off when nothing's being done, but there's always a scary proposition. So that would be our biggest concern. We're not someone who's going to liquidate our assets, move into too defensive. The only place we really play the defensive game on occasion is in this fixed income allocation, because there are, this way is the best way. All three of these managers are in our fixed income allocation in both accounts. Bradford Marzak is long. Payton Regal is 1 to 5, it shows there. And then Loomis Sales manages bank loans and high yield. So there comes times where we sit there and we'll talk to Loomis Sales about, is it now the time to go more high yield or more bank loans? And there'll be times that we talk about, is now the time to go ahead and start taking some money from the long term if we see inflation and move it to the 1 to 5 year so it resets quicker. So those are the kind of discussions we have. Value growth, we're not going to get it. We play both sides of it. We're going to invest in both sides of it. We're not going to play the game where we're going to try to tell you whether value or growth stocks are going to do better. So. Any other questions? If there's anything we can do for Midwestern, I've talked to someone in the past about our energy program, which continues to grow. Anything we can do, she knows how to get a hold of me, and we'll certainly help out. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you for coming down, Kevin, making the trip from College Station to visit with us.
No problem.
Well, item 17-113, modification of the MSU org chart. A copy of the university organization chart that will go into effect September 1st is shown in the board book. The agenda item outlines the changes that have been made. Are there questions for any of the vice presidents about the changes? If not, this item is presented as a point of information only and no action is necessary. Item 17-114, board resolution. Resolution recognizing Lindsay Shelley for her service as student regent last year is included in the board book. Is there a motion to approve this item? Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The original resolution will be passed around for your signature. Thank you, guys. Our next items will be discussed in the executive session later this afternoon, and the committee of the whole stands in recess until that time. We now move on to regular committee business. The executive committee will come to order. The members of the committee joining me today are Ms. Crosno, Ms. Marks, and Ms. Burks. Our first item is 17-116, approval of the minutes of the executive committee meeting May 11. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, they stand approved as presented. Item 17-117, the campus construction update. The board book includes project status reports and a report on smaller construction projects. Additionally, Mr. Owen has photographs of our current projects to share with us. Now.
Thank you. We'll go kind of brief here, but wanted to update you on the parking lot situation. This is where we were last April, and where we are as of early last week. And actually, since this time, we've finished off the fence in the back. They've striped the parking lot. The The light pole has been erected, and really the only part we have left is to put a handicap ramp in over here and some curb repairs down here. So really within the next week and a half, 2 weeks, I'd expect this to be completed. Burns Chapel, it's a little redundant. Believe it or not, that's what it used to look like with kind of faded pews and whatnot. Here we are today. This is redundant too. Just to clarify though, this is the area that music currently occupies. The drawing studio was right here, mass comm over here. Now music gets expanded to this area, and the drawing studio just moves. Again, I'm going to kind of keep this. And last but not least, we did resurface several of our courts. The tennis courts, we've resurfaced them 2 or 3 times since I've been here, and we've always just put a new coating on. This time we took it down to the concrete because there were a lot of dead spots in it. So it took a little longer, but I think the end result is better and should last longer the next cycle. And then we resurfaced Ligon or Stockton Court. I should note though that there's only so much wood that you can keep grinding off, and we're kind of there. So the next time we do it, we're going to have to replace this flooring. That's roughly a $200,000 expenditure, but that's 4 or 5 years out. Any questions?
If no one has any questions related to this item is presented for information only and no action is necessary. Item 17-118, honorific and gift-related namings. This item was included in the board book to give the board an opportunity to provide input regarding the policy, and no action would be recommended at this time. Dr. Fiscal, please tell us about the policy.
Sure. Thanks, Sam. The policy, that we're looking at, a couple things about it. I know you've had a chance to read it. Would be, it's a good idea. We're moving in our comprehensive campaign to look at that. It helps clarify things for donors. We know how much it costs, for example, the price tag $10 professorship. And then also just best practices, and appreciative of you as a board kind of guiding us in making sure that we're, moving forward on best practices in governance. And this is part of that evolution process that Dr. Shipman was taking us through. Some of the background on it, Barry Maka has done, as usual, done a great amount of research. He has a lot of his network of attorneys that work in university systems and templates, and go to the Association of Governing Boards. A lot of the framework comes from a lot of research from Barry. On the research on the endowment minimums, we look a lot at best practices, peers in Texas, other peers in there. We talked extensively among Dr. Shipley, myself, and Pat Fossey, our consultant, and that's where those numbers kind of come from as far as the minimums. So without any other, comments, I'll just try to answer any questions you may have. And Barry's available too on the more legal sector.
Any discussion or feedback related to this item for Dr. Fiscal? Okay. This item is presented for information only, and no action is necessary at this time. The final policy will be presented to the board for approval in November.
Thank you.
Item 17-119, Moffett Library Renovation Project approval amount. The administration has recommended a number of action items related to this project. Mr. Owen, please explain.
Sure. As the agenda item says, the planning for this project was approved in 2015, and now we're ready to move into the next phase of it with hiring an architect and getting approval to proceed with design. So we're asking for your approval of the budgeted amount of $7.3 million, and we've also are asking for. We went through the RFQ process where we had a committee of 6 evaluate potential architects and had 9 submissions and decided on Holtzman, Moss, and Bettina. I call them H&B, can't say their name. And they've been involved with the planning of the TRB money all along, and so they're very knowledgeable and have done a great job to this point. And so we were encouraged by their submission, and we backed their team with local architect firm Harper Perkins, who actually did the last renovation in the 80s of Moffett. So we recommend that selection. And the last item there is to increase it. The President have authorization to increase it to the full funded amount towards the end, thereafter.
Well, before we discuss further, could I have a motion to approve this item as presented?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion? Well, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 17-120, the Texas Accessibility Standards, TAS, ADA, and Fire Marshal Upgrades Project, guaranteed maximum price approval. Mr. Owens, please review this item and recommendation.
Sure. As it says, the bids are bidded in mid-July, and the bids are due on the 17th of this month. We're asking for authorization to be able to contract with the CMAR, M&F Litigant, and the local firm to be able to move forward with construction. The majority of the construction won't begin till January, and the vast majority of it will be over the summer when the students, there's less students around. But there are some long lead items, such as an elevator, that we need to have contract authority to be able to initiate that process. So that's why we're doing it now instead of waiting for the November board when we actually do the GMP evaluation.
Before we have discussion, can I have a motion to approve this recommendation as presented?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
How would we pay for this?
I'm sorry, how are we paying for it?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the TRB projects.
Oh,
The
okay.
$58 million. It's part of that.
Okay.
Have the bonds already been sold? Yes.
Any other questions or discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 17-121, the Gunn College of Health Sciences and Human Services Building Project, guaranteed maximum price approval. Mr. Owens, please explain this item and recommendation.
Sure. This project's much like Legacy, where we issued a site package first, followed by a building package second, just from a scheduling standpoint. And we're trying to do that same thing with the health science building. It's out for bid at the moment. The bids for the site package are due in early or next week, and then we will get estimates for the rest of the building package at that same time. And if those estimates combined with the GMP that they develop are below our approved cost construction limit of $29.25 million, then we're requesting authorization to move forward to contract, start construction. And then the billing package will, it'll bid starting in early September, and then we'll come back in November for your approval on it.
Before we have discussion, can I have a motion to approve this recommendation as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 17-122, strategic plan. Dr. Shipley will review this item with us. A copy of the administration's recommendation is in your folder.
All right, now we're going to start talking. Lunch is over, nap time's over. We're going to talk. So Dr. Scott Meadow is here with me today, and he's going to come to the table in a moment because I've told him you're really excited to ask him a lot of questions about this strategic plan. We went over it the last time we met and have left it with you in the interim. You know, it's important to us. We had a whole retreat, a day-long retreat to talk about our strategic priorities. There's a timeline on pages 48 and 49 of 204, and that outlines how we have gotten to this point by working with you, with the campus, and with the planning committee to create the plan in front of you. You saw it last time. It's now here for your approval, and that approval means that you approve our being able to move forward with this as a vehicle toward bringing anything that needs your approval normally back to you for approval. So just if there's a raise or a building in this plan, it will still come forward to you for the normal discussion and approval that you always have. But this gives us our marching orders as a campus. What this next year will be like is we'll be asking the committee to work on a mission and a vision statement to top off the plan. We'll be asking them to bring suggestions and recommendations forward for the next items that need to be funded. Once they've given us a funding recommendation, it will go to the cabinet. The cabinet will review that funding recommendation, and that will go before the budget oversight committee, just like all recommendations for funding do. So this will be an iterative process where you see each year the committee bringing forward what needs to be moved on. It goes to the budget committee, and then in spring, while the budget committee is dealing with financing the goals of the plan, the committee will be looking at outcomes, researching the outcomes, gathering results and data, and making decisions on whether we need to keep the plan the way it is or make significant changes or small changes. Once their work is done at the end of the spring, we'll bring this back before the board and update you on how we've done during that year. Ultimately, the actions associated with this plan will form the basis of our accreditation report. We have a 5-year report that's due in a year and a half, so it will be very helpful to have this plan approved by you in order to move forward and begin to measure the outcomes from the plan and the results of the plan. So if you don't have questions specifically on the timeline in the vehicle, I'd love for Dr. Meadow to come forward and help answer any questions. And maybe tell the group a little bit about, just remind them how you got here and how the plan got here.
As far as how we got to this point, the group was formed and we were given the initiatives as the starting point. And from those strategic initiatives, then we developed a series of, or a set of tasks that were under each of those initiatives. And that makes up the plan which was presented at the last meeting and is summarized in this document as well. We did that without regard for cost, time, or those other sorts of details that would normally be part of a plan because we were thinking strategic. And now the point is to get down to those levels of detail. What does the budget support, or what additional budget support is needed? And again, all subject to all normal processes and improvements and everything else. So we're kind of at the point now where we will assess these initiatives or new ones as time goes on in terms of their impact, small, medium, large, and also cost, small, medium, and large. And the focus is on those large impact items to the extent that they can be supported by the realities of budget. So it's a continuous process. It's not a strategic plan for this year followed by another process to come up with another strategic plan and another strategic plan, but rather a process, I guess the best comparison would be a continuous improvement plan.
So I have two questions. One, did you guys talk about a time horizon for this? To your point, I mean, you don't want to reiterate this every year, 5 years. Okay, good. Second question, and I've talked to Dr. Shipley about this. You mentioned budget. I would love, I'm a numbers guy, talking numbers, and I would love to understand dollars and cents impact, but in fairness, I don't want to spend, no amount of time trying to figure out how much each of these things are going to cost. I love what you said about impact, and I think that that's really, really important for us as a board to understand is it's going to cost us $1.98 to do this, but the impact is this. You know what I mean? That would be really, I think, valuable for this board.
And one of the conversations that the group had was to do exactly that. It was not part of the charge, but the conversation involved that. And I have a markup that I transferred over to this, which just highlights those that are, you can't see this yet, those that are easily doable and impact ranges from small to large, and those that are.
That was my next comment is you ought to really think about, okay, what can we do now for the most impact with the least amount of effort, least amount of cost. I mean, I think that's a huge, huge step. It's gonna be fabulous.
Precisely the next.
Perfect.
Does this strategic plan tie in with our budget that we worked on? In
Yes.
terms of numbers of students, et cetera?
Right.
But it's not been
No,
woven tightly.
well, a little bit. At the retreat, we took the strategic plan that you had already seen,
Right.
and we identified what was already in the budget to be funded. So you'll notice there's a lot of emphasis on marketing and identity in this. So what was so neat about staying outside the process and then getting together with the committee, they were going exactly down many of the
Yeah.
same pathways that the cabinet had already been thinking about, but it was wonderfully parallel.
And I think that's absolutely what I'm saying is, man, if we can find a way to weave all this together in a nice little, tight little tapestry, that would be fantastic. I mean, it would really work well.
Well, and it is a living document, I'm assuming, so it does keep us on task, and it's like a blueprint knowing what's going to happen. My question is, if anything out of the ordinary comes up where perhaps we have an incredible donor that wants to do something that's not in the strategic plan, you will still have the opportunity to add that to that strategic plan. Is that correct?
That's the whole point of it, is to continue this process.
Okay. And I do think it's very important that it be brought forward regularly, just to see where we are.
That's the best way.
I commend the measurable outcomes you have here. It's really good. The measurable outcomes you have, this is really good. It's hard to sign up for these things. It's very difficult to decide what you want to do. But it's essential when Marilyn looks at what we need to plan to see what you're actually trying to do. So really difficult, really good job in that. So I commend the group on that.
Yeah, committee, thank you.
Well, and I just want to add, I agree that the data that you'll have and the measurement is good, but one thing that I didn't see throughout was a measurement of quality. It seems like we're measuring percentages, we're measuring how many people do this, this, and this, but in terms of that impact, shouldn't we be measuring for quality of whatever?
I wrap the term quality up in terms of impact. Something that has high impact will typically have high quality as well. Something which is relatively low in terms of impact typically will fall off of the planning process in short order. As far as the quality measures, some things you're able to measure that against a set of metrics. Others are somewhat soft. There really isn't a good measure to come up with a quantitative quality. Item number one, tactic one, for example, is very low cost, very easy to implement, but there's not really a quality measure that can really assess that.
Well, let me ask you, I mean, would the quality measurement not be tied back to student success?
Some of them are tied back to student success. For example, the idea of having a enhanced first-year experience, for example, to get students, particularly those coming from families with first opportunity to go to college, well situated in terms of what that means. What are the differences between freshmen versus high school? And there, the quality measure would be how many of those students, what fraction of those students are retained, move forward to degree, 4 years or whatever, compared to history, what's happened before.
Okay.
So I'm a measurement person as well, because that's
Okay.
the easiest, most quantitative justification.
Well, and maybe it's just not really jumping out at me, but I think our conversations earlier, especially dealing with the budget, talking about enrollment drives everything. And so to me, it's not just real strong of what we're doing to actually increase or maintain enrollment. If we have I know that we address reducing retention, or the number of students who are dropping out, but I don't know. I mean, and I know that you're so familiar with the plan and all the discussions that went in its development. Was that a driving force for the strategic plan?
Right, because everything does revolve around the number of students that drives the budget. There are a number of items that are specifically focused on increasing the number of students, ranging from web page improvements, which have associated a cost, yet to be determined, to increasing retention, graduation rates, and so on in terms of providing additional counseling, additional guidance counseling, and so on, additional tutoring, those types of things. So there are many ways in which to go, and the next step really is to take all of those steps, prioritize against the budget, against outcomes, and then come back. Okay, here's the next phase, what will be approved.
When I would compliment you guys that really the strategic initiative for we were looking at kind of the university, its engagement within the Wichita Falls community. I think one of the challenges that I've seen, that I continue to see, is it seems like the university is very active at reaching out to the community and trying to bring the community in. It doesn't seem like the community responds in kind. I don't know where the disconnect is, where it seems like this is really a centerpiece, in my opinion, of Wichita Falls. And it seems like there's something in between that. So I'm glad to see that on there. I think that's going to be a challenge as you guys invigorate the community, and that they understand the value of the gem that's sitting in the center of town. So.
I think part of that is you have to be at the table, and what I love about what the campus has done, we came out really strong around connecting with the community, and now we have people from all walks of life at the table when the Chamber of Commerce or the Air Force goes to do something. So our new Dean of Business is going to be one of the people leading the strategic planning process for the Chamber of Commerce. And we've just got good visibility at the Air Force Base now. And so I think little by little people come to trust you when you show up. And so we've made great inroads with Vernon College. It took a while to convince them we wanted to be their partner, and they get it now. You just have to, when you put a goal, one of your 4 initiatives of your plan is outreach, it's amazing the rebound effect that has. I hope it'll only get better.
Well, before we discuss further, can I have a motion to approve this item as presented?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Is there any other discussion? Well, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Next item is item 17-123, Wichita Falls Museum of Art at MSU Advisory Board. The agenda contains the names of individuals recommended for appointment or reappointment to the Museum Advisory Board. Can I have a motion to approve these individuals as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I would like to say, I see that everybody that we're appointing is already on the board. I would encourage the people to try to get some new people involved.
We did have our first meeting yesterday, or not first meeting, quarterly. But yes, these have been reappointed, and then Mary Kimball is the new appointee. That is a good observation.
One of the things I've talked to Debbie and Dr. Shipley about, we've mentioned before, is I'd really like for the board to have an opportunity to go to meetings. So maybe at some point we can structure something where the board can, either it's a dinner or we do part of the meeting there so that you guys can actually see what's happening there. I think it's a pretty amazing facility that's accompanying the university. I think it's got a lot of potential. It needs a little bit of attention, I think we can do. Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. So the motion carries. That concludes the business to come before this committee. We now move on to the Academic and Student Affairs Committee. Dr. Gibbons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Academic and Student Affairs Committee will now come to order. Members of the committee joining me today are Mr. Hessing, Ms. Marks, and Dr. Sweat. Our first item is 17-124, the approval of the minutes of our committee meeting held May 11th, 2017. Or are there any additions or corrections? If not, they will stand approved as presented. The next item is 17-125, the faculty report. Dr. David Carlston, the Faculty Senate Chairman, has informed me that the Senate has not met since our May meeting and that he had nothing specific to report, but he is available to answer questions if you have them, or if you would like to talk with him later. Are there any questions that specifically? All right, well, thank you, Dr. Carlson. Our next item is 17-126, the staff report, and Ms. Angie Ray, Chair of the MSU Staff Senate, will present the report and will then visit with us about her work at MSU. Ms. Ray.
Hello, how's everyone doing? Good. Good. We have had one meeting since we last met in May. We actually had Dr. James Johnston come and talk in his new role as provost to our committee, so we were very thankful for that. I also think I left my other papers in my planner, but that's fine. We just had our staff senate election, so we've been working on nominations and our elections for our new incoming representatives. This will be my last meeting here as the staff senate chair. I have been on the staff senate executive committee for the last 4 years, so we can only serve 2 terms, so I'll be sitting out at least for a year, maybe then coming back. The other one, we had Wendy Dodson. She is one of our facility service custodians. She was nominated for our You Make a Difference award winner this summer. And she's actually going to be on our staff senate next year. So we're excited to have her as part of staff senate. And but it's been a pretty slow summer. I didn't know, Dr. Carlson, we could just skip. So I didn't know about that. So, but yes, so we will have an election for our executive committee next week, and so I will be getting the new chair to Dr. Joyce. So, any other questions about Jackson?
Well, thank you very much for your report and your leadership and service to MSU.
Yes, and then she's going to show her. Yeah,
she's going to be the top. She's going to be the subject.
Yes. Okay, so I just wanted to share a little bit about how I got here to Midwestern and kind of where I came from. So I'm it's on the timer, hold on. See if I can take the timer off. Oh, it just keeps focusing. Okay. Well, maybe
Talk fast.
I'll talk really fast. Well, I'm originally from Kansas. I transferred to Midwestern in the fall of 2004. This is at my undergraduate ceremony. That's with my family. And sorry, thank you. I received my undergraduate in early childhood education and then my master's in education leadership. And since then, I've also been a certified group fitness instructor, so I was doing that as well throughout my career here. I played basketball at Garden City Community College. That's where I spent my first 2 years. I was an academic All-American, and then these are some of my pictures from playing here when we were the Indians, when I played basketball here at Midwestern. So I was on our commissioner honor roll. I played basketball here again for 2 years, and then these are where I rank overall for Midwestern for 3-point percentage and 3-pointers made. So I can throw that up there. No, that's okay. Okay, so some of these are all of my job careers that I've had here at Midwestern, mostly in residence life and housing. I actually started as a resident assistant in 2005 and worked my way through the housing field all the way up to the interim director for a little bit. Currently, starting in April, I am now the director of rec sports and wellness. So I transitioned over there this spring. I also am an adjunct professor for the College of Education. I teach a course over there, and then I also still continue to teach my group fitness classes, and so I have some of my classes up here and playing basketball and some of the students and everything. So again, I've been on staff senate for the last 4 years. I've had really good opportunities with that. With that, I think I've been on almost every committee at the university. I'm on the budget oversight committee. I was able to help with the first year experience. Those were probably 2 of my favorites that I've been a part of. And then I was part of Dr. Johnston's search as provost, the policy, and I'm also a Title IX investigator for the university. So I wear a lot of different hats, but there have been a lot of good opportunities here, and I'm very thankful, and Staff Senate has definitely helped with those opportunities. This picture kind of cracked me up. I was leadership Wichita Falls class of 2002, and I always win at everything, and we got dead last in our competition, so I was like putting that picture up there. I was the advisor of the year in 2012, and I was the former advisor for the Mustang Maniac, our spirit group, and then the Residence Hall Association, and then also our Ultimate Frisbee team. So that's who I've been the advisor for throughout my career here at Midwestern. Currently now, I've been in my role for about 4 months over at the Wellness Center, but we do offer recreational sports. That is one of the big things that students like to come over and do. My assistant director actually just started this week, so I'm very excited about that and having him on board. But we do offer rec sports, our wellness programming, our group fitness classes, and we have an amazing facility. And Randy's back here, and he was a part of that, and so we're very thankful for the facility that we have here on campus. And then these are just some of the sports that we offer for rec sports. We started to partner with our Unified Sports League, which helps with Special Olympics, and so we run programs for their events and everything, as well with volunteers on our campus with our students. And of course, this is the last. This is my family. Chris is the assistant women's basketball coach. We actually met here at Midwestern. And these are our 2 wonderful girls, Allison and Caitlin. And Allison is about to start kindergarten this month, so we are all kinds of busy. But they love coming out and cheering with the cheerleaders. And so this is a little bit about me and what I've done here at Midwestern.
Well, thank you very much. You've done a number of things. Item 17-127 is the Student Government Report. Our new SGA president, whom you all met in May, Maria Pena, provided a written update that's in your board book and will provide additional information. Ms. Pena?
Hello, everyone. Well, usually the summers are very slow for our Student Government Association since we don't technically meet in the Student Senate until October after I-Lead and the org fair takes place. But for now in the summer, we have our vice president working as an orientation leader with student development, and then Jalen, our secretary, will be coming in, I think, this coming week for her RA position, and we plan on coming to assist the students during move-in day so that they see our faces and that we're there with everyone working with them. But during this time, during the summer, we've been planning a couple of events and some things that we hope to implement that will be successful this year so that all of our student senators are not just involved but being student leaders on campus as well. We would like to ensure that we're not just technically meeting as a Senate, but being more active within the committees that we've been a part of during the past few years and currently. And something that I would really like to see is our student senators be a little bit more active in our community and see if we can help bring that relationship with our community a little bit closer to Midwestern. But that might be a little bit of a stretch for now. But we do plan on doing some events in the beginning of August towards September, since we won't meet as a Senate, so that we're actually doing some things to keep ourselves busy and so that the students see that we're doing things for them. And one of the first events that we will be having would be Waffle Wednesday. That would be the big event that we usually do, and that would be in the Mustangs Mavericks Corner or in the Mesquite Dining Hall. I'm not sure which one it's going to be in yet, but I'm very excited for that. And so we have some plans that I would like to see implemented with engagement with our student body and retention within our senators and fulfillment with everybody as a Mustang family. I would really like to see their student government do a little bit more for everyone on campus and be a little bit more active, not just have all of the stress be on the execs, as Shayla might know. Last year she was the president and she did a lot. And I hope that our chairs and the student senators will help with that kind of the job that we have to serve our students, because if we're a part of the Senate, then we're supposed to be a part of what we do as in leadership for everyone here at Midwestern. And so that's all I have for you today, unless you have any questions or concerns, comments.
Well, thank you, Ms. Pena, and we look forward to working with you and the rest of the SGA staff.
Thank you.
Item 17-128 is the athletics report. Mr. Williams is here to review his report and provide additional information. Mr. Williams.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I also have a 30-minute PowerPoint presentation. Oh yeah, Debbie said I couldn't do that. I am from Kansas, so. Well, I think I have a report about our athletic endeavors. We've had a good year. I think can we get better? Absolutely, we can get better on the field and certainly in the classroom. I'm really excited about the opportunity to have a new person, honestly, at the bottom of the page. I'm going to talk about that just for a little bit. We'd like to put in a position that is going to oversee our MSU athletic endeavors and our athletic success. As successful as you've read for some of these folks up top and graduation and all those things, that's certainly what we're all about here at Midwestern State University. We need to do a better job. We do. And I'm going to do my darndest, and we're going to do our darndest to make sure that happens. But this position is going to oversee the Mustangs 360 that is on an internet providing. It's on the internet, so kids can go on every week and have a challenging question to them as far as life skills, time management. It's just a wonderful, wonderful program to get on, and they have their in number they can get on, and we're continuing to emphasize to make sure that they know to challenge them with questions and some things like that. So I'm really excited about that. It's a 3-year deal. We are in year 2 of that. So we will continue to coordinate and collaborate with other university offices to provide academic support for our 325 student athletes. And again, through this effort, the department will be able to assist at-risk students. We talk about retention. 10 years I've been here, I've heard retention, and I certainly understand that a little bit more now. And I'm prepared. We're prepared as a university through Dr. Johnston, and we've had some great meetings. And I thank you for the opportunity that we have to meet and go forward with our 325 student athletes. So we're excited about that. So that actually won't start, that person won't start until September 1. I have interviews next week, and so we will make sure that gets done, and excited about that. Another thing that we're doing, 2 years ago when Natalie Rawson came to us as our volleyball coach, she came into the office and talked about a trip overseas, international. And I said, well, honestly, we've never done that. And the NCAA gives you, every 4 years, gives you the team an opportunity to travel internationally. And so, to be honest with you, I just kind of went in here and there, and because it's an expensive endeavor that, as she knew, had to be fundraised all the way. So anyway, she came in, and then she added another assistant who had even more information about how to get us over there. So for the last 6 to 8 months, they have been fundraising as a volleyball program to try to get to Argentina. Well, again, about 2 weeks ago, I gave them an ultimatum about 4 o'clock on a Friday and said, if we don't have the money, we're going to push it off the next year. Well, John came in at 2:30 and said, we got it. And I said, are you kidding me? Because we had a ways to go. And so I'm proud to say that we've made the number. And it's all fundraising. With the budget situation the way it is and all those things, I just want you all to know that they got it done. And without any department help, and other than just, way to go, get out there and do your thing and fundraise. And so they will be leaving August the 10th, I believe, or 12th for 10 days. And we'll go to Argentina and use it as a camp, a collaboration. It's an opportunity for her 5 seniors that have been here all the way through. Obviously, a nice little trip for them probably as well. But we're excited for them. And we will have proper coaches there and all of those things that go with that. But I felt like we needed to talk about that because it is a big endeavor, and it was a lot of money to get done. But to my surprise, quite frankly, they're going, and so we're glad for them, and look forward to seeing it all on social media. So, any questions for me?
I do.
Yes.
The conference, football conference. Originally, we had talked, and there was a struggle about getting conference games, and travel was. Is that still looking better? Are we seeing progress?
Do you want me to address that, or do you want to?
Go ahead. They just had a president's.
We just had a president's meeting, and the athletic directors are not at that meeting. But I've briefed Kyle. We're working aggressively to invite. We made a goal to have a number of teams where we can have an east and a west side of the conference and cut down on travel. So we are aggressively making offers to teams that are now in other conferences to join ours. And we've had 2 yeses for 2 asks so far. So we'll end up, right now we're at 10 teams, right, and we're trying to get to 16 so we can have 8 and 8. And that was a goal we added to the strategic plan.
And we'll have a conference championship.
Excuse me?
We'll have a conference championship game.
More to come on that.
Yeah, that wasn't really what drove it. What drove it was how excruciating it is to drive the number of miles with our students we have to drive. And then the other piece of that is Kyle and I really need another football playing institution because we have 9 teams that play football. And so we have to go out and pay a team to come play football with us because you have to have a 10-game season or you won't be competitive in any of the rankings.
Right.
So we have a contract with a team to come here this year, and we'll go there next year, and then we're also flying all the way to Florida.
Actually driving.
Driving well, I'm flying. You're driving all the way to Florida to play. So the LSC, the Lone Star Conference, is a good, strong conference, and I think we're really excited about how quickly people are saying yes when we were trying to collapse ourselves with another conference, and they just kept dragging their feet. So now we're going after their members and other people's members and just building it ourselves.
Yeah, it's kind of dog eat dog out there a little bit. I mean, NCAA, the D1 guys started all this certainly, and we've got a conference that's
but they're also requiring that every conference has at least 12 teams by 2 years from now.
2 years from now.
And there are several conferences that don't have that.
Right. And so the conference that we're after or going after a little bit here is has kind of dabbled with us and teased us a little bit, and so we're actually now going after them. And I've already heard from those folks, other folks that we're not going after.
But we're cherry picking that we decided to choose the teams we wanted in our conference rather than try to get the whole conference to combine with us. So that's what we're doing now.
Our soccer
we gave it a year.
in that conference right now.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have enough in a conference, so we play in the Heartland Conference as we speak. So
it's exciting times.
It is.
Any discussion around playing up for non-conference games?
Yes.
Let's go have a lunch with our football coach. Yes, I think we absolutely have to look at that. No question. We've got a couple in the conference right now that are, we got UTPB's playing Lamar this year. Now I don't know what kind of money. I'm going to find out, but and they'll get beat about 60-7, something like that. But I just think we can play with those folks. I really do. And so, the old thing here is you get your quarterback hurt, you're done for the year, kind of a thing. And of course, I like to say he can also trip over the curve going to practice. So, we'll see. More to come on this. I may need your help. So,
football players love to play, so I'm sure.
Absolutely.
They'll compete at any level.
Absolutely. So
that's all the questions.
Okay. Other questions? Well, thank you, Mr. Leach. Item 17-129 is the summer enrollment report. The 15th day for summer 2 was yesterday, and the summer enrollment reports are available. Copies of the reports are in your folders. Dr. Lamb, would you discuss our summer and fall enrollment, please?
Yes, sir.
as Dr. Givens mentioned, the summer enrollment reports are in your folder. As you can see, summer 1, we were down 95 head count. Summer 2, 164 head count. The primary reasons that we believe that we were down, we had a large graduating class this past year for Midwestern standards. It was very large. Increasing proportion of our students coming from DFW returning home during the summer. Pell still continues to have an effect on our summer enrollment as discussed earlier. And then we are also analyzing class times when classes were offered. We offered less sections but more seats this year, so larger sections. And we're analyzing to see if the times were what students needed. Dr. Givens, did you ask me to address fall as well?
Yes, please.
So as fall, and as we discussed earlier, for the fall we budgeted $6150, and we're tracking along nicely on that. As of yesterday, as previously mentioned, in August 2nd to August 2nd comparison, we were 70 students head count up, despite being one orientation behind, that orientation being today. So we should see another bump from that. As of this morning, we were 143 newly enrolled students ahead of the same date last year. Specifically, that's 100 for additional freshmen, 41 additional transfer, and then a -2 or 2 less returning students, students who stopped out for a semester and are coming back. And so we're doing good in terms of new students. With the large number of graduates we had this year, we need that many more new students to not only grow, but to make up for what we've lost over what we typically do in graduation. But we feel good about this fall. Our modeling suggests that if we have an average year from this point forward, being an average regular and late orientation and registration period, that we will certainly meet our 6150, and our freshman head count will be well north of 800. I was also asked to address housing capacity as part of this report, how that is looking. And we did make some changes in housing this year to try to better predict what our housing occupancy will be, and to try to reduce the melt that we see sometimes. Right now, we are sitting at 90% occupancy for the fall, and we still have a few weeks to go for which we will continue to have individuals sign up for housing. We budgeted at 86%, so we have already exceeded our assumed occupancy for fall budget. Last fall, we were at 84% was our final census. So we're at 90% now. That will continue to grow a little bit, and we're already 6 percentage points ahead of last fall's final numbers. Which, when we built Legacy, we assumed a lag of 2 or 3 years of under 100% occupancy, and it would slowly grow back, and that's what we're seeing.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I'll
Thank
take
you,
a question. Sorry.
Okay.
I was chewing popcorn. I apologize. Being as that we're at 90%, are we looking into the future as to when potentially we would be exceeding that capacity or running hot again?
Yes, we modeled that, and we initially thought when we were building Legacy we would run a below 100% for 3 years. So fall 16, fall 17, and fall 18. Given that our freshman class was lower than expected in the fall of 16, we're pushing that out 1 more year. So we believe it will be about 4 years under 100%. Right? So fall 16, fall 17, fall 18, and then fall 19, our modeling suggests will be high 90s, fall 20 back over 100%. Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay.
What's other capacity?
1765. Let me double check that for you. 17 high something. I think it's 65.
Are there other questions? Thank you, Dr. Lamb. This was presented for a point of information only and no action is necessary. Item 17-130 is the DFW expansion update. Dr. Lamb's written update is included in the board book. He has a special introduction to make and will then make comments and answer questions. Dr. Lamb.
Mr. Canavilla, could you please stand? And I'm going to stand up too, just so I don't have to sit down while he's standing. So I'd like to introduce our director for our flower mound. Come on over here. Okay, come over here. I get to sit by you? Please do. Randy Canavilla is the director for our Flower Mound campus. He began in June. Is that right? In June. And many of you remember Randy. He was our assistant director of recreational sports in the Wellness Center for a number of years. Randy left Midwestern and was on the faculty at SMU. We were very happy to recruit him back. He is doing an outstanding job. He is doing exactly what we knew he would do. He's high energy. He's out in the community. I was trying to watch TV the other night at close to midnight, and my phone starts dinging with ideas from Randy. So he's like the Energizer Bunny, and he is exactly what we need there, the high energy, personal, and getting out to meet everyone and promote our program. So, Randy, we are thrilled you're here. Thank you. Thanks for having me today, too.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate the work you are doing and will be doing. Are there any questions? Well, this is presented as a point of information only and no action is necessary. Thank you.
We look forward to Randy's hosting the next board meeting at our real building. Yeah. Or a board meeting soon.
Yes. Thank you. Item 17-131 is the August 2017 graduating class. The administration recommends approval of the candidates for August graduation as presented. There are 221 students on the list compared to 216 in 2016. Could I have a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Item 17-132, approval of 2018-19 academic calendar. The administration recommends approval of the calendar for 2018-19 academic year as presented. Before we have a discussion, is there a motion to approve the calendar? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion of the calendar? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Item 17-133, academic department reorganization and name change. The administration's recommendations are presented in the board book. Dr. Johnston, would you please comment on these recommendations?
The first one was in the Dillard College of Business. Early on, we moved legal studies as a program to follow the credentials of one of the faculty so that he could serve as department chair. He's since asked to step down as chair, so in the reorganization, we're moving it back to its normal place with accounting. That's where that program normally lives, to again align with the faculty, the credentials of the faculty to chair that department. So the Pro-3 you've been continue with that one. The changes within Pro-3 or the name change, really that's just modernizing the language, if you will, for foreign languages to world languages and culture. You may remember in May we added several in the core that were language courses with culture, so this is more reflective of what we're currently doing with those. They're teaching language but couching it in the culture that it's with.
All right. Before we have a discussion, could I have a motion and a second? Is there a motion for this? To approve these changes?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Is there any discussion of the changes? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. This concludes the business of the Academic and Student Affairs Committee, Mr. Chairman. I do apologize for voting in your committee.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gibbons. been noted here on my outline. You might want to take a break, we'll only take a 10-minute break to reconvene. All right, everybody. Try to get back to it so that we don't run late to dinner.
Thank you.
Well, we're back to the Finance Committee. Turn it over to Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. The Finance Committee will now come to order. Members of the committee are here today are Mr. Ayers, Mr. Crosno, and Dr. Gibbons. Our first item, 17-134, is the approval of the minutes for May 11th, 17 meeting. Are any additions or corrections? If not, they stand approved as presented. Our next item, 17-135, is a summary of financial support through June 30. Before I ask Tony to review his reports, I'd like to highlight some of the gifts received since our last meeting. With generous support from the Tree Foundation, thank you, Dr. Sweat, the Tree Stars program will begin this fall and fund grants for 10 entering freshmen, 10 sophomores, and 10 juniors, and the program will expand to 40 students in the fall of 18 to include 10 new incoming freshmen. Students selected will receive full tuition and residential funding, and the program will focus on first-generation students from the North Texas region. That's terrific. Thank you very much. Mrs. Robert Boland pledged $40,000 over 2 years to support the Robert Boland Graduate School of Petroleum Geology. The Chemistry Department received a departmental research grant of $35,000 from the Robert Welch Foundation. And you may recall last November, we were told a gift from the George and Fay Young Foundation to support students for 3 years. The pledge was received last September. A payment of $25,000 was recently received. What a great benefit for a student. And Eric Robb contributed $20,000 to the Roy and Greta Hogan Foundation Fund for need-based scholarships. Our support from foundations, community, alumni, and friends continues to be outstanding. We appreciate everybody very much. And Tony, if you would, please review the reports.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Back in July, I had the occasion to take a couple days, go home in Ohio. Saw my mom, who's starting to be honestly dealing with some age-related, dementia. I was helping my sister, and we were going through some things. And I went through what I call the maternal inquisition. You're never exempt from that. If you're 80 or 18, Shayla, you think it's going to end. Your mom asks you all these questions, and it never ends. She said, "What's it like in Texas? And what are the people like? And what's your boss like? And your neighborhood?" And we were talking, and I told her, I said, I really appreciate the integrity and the honesty of the people I work with, the people in the town. People are very helpful, very friendly. Honesty, like I said, sometimes they're honest. They'll tell you what you don't necessarily want to hear, but you need to hear. And the resilience. And those were some of the things we talked about. And I was reflecting on, being here a year. And then one of those things that we came across, we were also going through mementos. And she said, "Do you remember when you got this scholarship?" And I said, "I sure do." And I was chosen by our science department to represent my high school to go to a science camp. It was a $200 value, and we were there for 2 weeks. And they had a test. You had to take a test at the end of that, 2 weeks. It was 400 questions. I remember it. It was the first and only standardized test I ever took that I got all right. And it was my confidence went up so much. From that. I was the first person ever, and I think the only person ever scored a perfect on that. The faculty, like our faculty here, spent time with me. And I thought to myself, and my mom, I said, "Mom, remember I was telling you about that Pretty Scholars thing? Think about that. Someone made a $200 investment. And after that, I came back, she said, you never turned back. I wasn't even sure if you were going to go to college. And boom. Because my dream in 8th grade was to play football at college. I didn't think about doing the academics on it, which is a strange thing, but you know what 8th graders think. So all that to say, as I look back my first year, as I told my mom, we both were getting kind of emotional about it. Someone invested $200 so that I could go to a science camp in Ohio. But think about what our Pretty Scholars is going to do. And that's the thing that I'm the most proud of, to be part of a team, a community, a campus where that can happen. And, you know, we're doing pretty well in our fundraising attainment too. You see some reports there. I'm not going to look at every one of them, but I'm proud to report that even at the end of June, we were at $6.325 million out of a $5.5 million goal for our new gifts and commitments. A lot of generous people have made that possible. Some other things that I think, looking back in the year, our first year in the campaign and my first year here, to have a campaign steering committee form, a very good, active, involved campaign steering committee that pushes us and invigorates us, and we have a lot of fun too. And some of them are here with us. Launching planned giving. Tuesdays, some of you have met already. Our Assistant Vice President of Gift Planning, Rhonda McClung, started. It's so neat to see that and the vision that this board had and others in this campaign steering committee. People invested to make, frankly, that position possible. Presidential involvement. Dr. Shipley's consistent and broad involvement has really been a blessing, and it's helped us in the year. We added a new CRM. We redid our CRM in the system, so we're tracking data better. Warren and I were talking about, you learn how you do that scan thing with the documents, but we're moving ahead in that area. Governance, MOUs, we've made progress. Those are all things that you're doing. When Dr. Lamb at Cabinet not too long ago showed us a picture of our actual building at Flower Mound, I was thinking that girders are up. And this is a sense where what you do in your first year campaign. The girders are up and some other things. And I know that Dr. Shipley and our campaign committee and I look back wrapping up that time with my mom, and before I'll turn it over to Dr. Shipley if she has any comments she wants to make. Only as a mom could do. She says, well, that was a pretty good report, but you're only doing what you're supposed to do. It kind of does put it in perspective, Mom. Thank you for that. Dr. Shipley, do you have any comments would you like to make this time?
Yes, I would. Why don't we look on pages, I really appreciate that Tony prepares good, strong charts. So pages 75 and 77 are particularly of interest to me. Because if you look from page 75 back towards page 74, and you look at realized bequests, that's the one column in the monthly comparison where you see almost no numbers. And Tony and I have a goal that when we do this next year, we're going to see more planned giving and more bequests coming in. We think that's a major area of focus for us that we've neglected. And likewise, when you look at the pie chart on 75, you see what a great percentage of our giving comes from foundations, and we're really fortunate in this area that so many people have funded our growth through their gifts to foundations. But we also are going to need later in the campaign to branch out to individuals. So in the early parts of our campaign, we're reaching out to foundations and to our established donors. But as you see us this time next year, Tony and I will be bringing in gifts from people that might not have given before. We'll be doing a lot with the PEC. And then we'll begin to launch out into a faculty and staff campaign. We'll be doing an alumni campaign. Today you're going to hear about the role that the boards will play and that we're going to go for 100% board giving now. So a 7-year campaign gives us the luxury of lining things up so not only can donors decide when they want to give, but Tony and I can go from largest gifts to medium-sized gifts to smaller gifts with the goal of always expanding the number of donors in this pool. So when you turn over and you look at the other pie chart for the PEC, that's a pie chart that reflects a more normal type of giving. We're just so fortunate to have wealthy, generous foundations here, but when you look at individual giving, it's more likely to come from alumni, students, friends, parents. What's really cool is we have foundations that give matches, so that when we have individual donors giving gifts, part of that 23% in that foundation pie chart is a match from a foundation. And so I'll just finish up by saying I think our year is going to be punctuated by celebrating the presence of the Pretty Scholars on this campus and celebrating the partnership with the Pretty Foundation that's going to allow us to make a real mark on educating first-generation students. We really want to partner to see whether we can move the dial on helping first-generation students stay in college by affording college and getting special programming to help them succeed. So I think it's a wonderful adventure that I'm looking forward to, and I'm really grateful for the giving we've seen this year. Next year, Tony and I have a goal of $7 million. We're going to continue to set goals for ourselves and be either happy or embarrassed in front of you when we reach them or don't. But we're off and running, and we feel like we've built very good momentum this summer, and we're ready for the year ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Shipley. Before I bring up Mr. Hessing, who's going to help us with the presentation, is there any questions related to anything that Dr. Shipley want to comment on that I could address? Mr. Hessing's going to come up, and as a member of our campaign steering committee, you know Sean has.
No. Oh no.
Okay, you want to
Oh
come
no.
up, speakers have to go to the end.
Tony was adamant that I needed to come up here.
He's going to come up here. As you know, Sean
Did you tell him to shave too?
That's only something that
his wife can tell.
Lori's the only one that can tell me to shave, and I'll listen. How about that? And even now, I have permission because we're going to Colorado. So there you go. So listen, Shayla and I are on the campaign committee, and I have to say it's been a great experience to watch this thing develop and watch it evolve. The reason I'm sitting here today is they've asked me as a member of that committee and a member of this board to discuss with the board in an open session about what we think needs to happen with the board, and that is 100% participation. I'm involved on a number of boards, and we've done campaigns on those boards. And anytime we go to a foundation, for instance, and ask for money, the first thing they ask is, what is board participation? If it's something less than 100%, there is a frown. So my purpose here today is to state to the board, we need 100% participation. Not to ask you to think about it, but to encourage you to do it. Sam and I had a conversation, a month and a half, 2 months ago, and I think Sam's on the same page as me. And so it's not a matter of a strong arm tactic. It's not a matter of sitting here and saying we expect X dollars. I do think that, Sam, we ought to sit down and think about as a board collectively what a goal would be for the board, but not to say, hey, we expect this much from every board member, because every board member has a different situation. Every board member is completely different. So 100%. When I was a managing partner at KPMG, one of the things we did for a big charity that we were involved with every year was to put dollars with it. And I changed that when I became managing partner, said I want 100% participation. And so as part of that, I said, I will have my barber come in and shave my head if we get 100% participation. And we did. And she did. That said, that ain't happening. Sorry about that. But I tell you what, if we do it, I'll keep the beard, and when we get there, I'll shave it. Needless to say, it's coming off when we get back to college. So any questions of me?
A letter will go out. We'll follow up with a letter with a solicitation card. And didn't you say you'd like to have this done in time to announce at our December board meeting?
November board meeting, yes.
Yeah, November. I keep saying November, and they tell me December.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Well, I do have a question. The little card we get every year, and I can't remember how it's styled, but and it's got the choices like universities, race, et cetera, et cetera.
It's through the alumni. So you get it as an alum.
Yeah. Okay. Does that count? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Well, let me say something. I would argue that it does not count.
No,
Here's the thing that I was going to add at the very end of this is that some of us are already giving in other places, and I want us to continue to do that. I want us to go above and beyond what we're normally giving. I want us to say this is going to be in addition to what I give to PEC or to golf or to football or to scholarships or whatever it is. I really think it's important that we do that, because this campaign is unique in the history of this university, And I think this giving opportunity is unique in this university's history. So I would encourage us to look at it differently and say, it doesn't count. What we're given now, let's go above and beyond.
Well, for example, every member of the PEC will get a campaign solicitation. Right. So every member of the PEC is giving $1,000 at least. Right. And we will be visiting with them and asking if we can come and present another ask to them. This is a one-time ask. It can be paid over 5 years, and it should be your gift to the university for these 5 years to the next decade.
Right. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you. I concurred. Sean spoke after Julie, I think, that as a board, we absolutely can come 100% to participate in a program like this. So I would encourage you to do so.
Okay. Tony, do you have anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. And so we've covered the combined campaign as part of 17-135. As a reminder, the folder contains a list of donors and note cards. If you haven't already, please write thank you notes to those assigned to you. Any others you'd like to include. These notes from the board are well received, and thank you for taking the time to personalize them. Item 17-136, financial reports. The administration recommends acceptance of April, May, and June 17 financial reports as previously distributed. Dr. Flay's summary of the latest report is included in the board book. Before we open the floor for discussion, can I have a motion to accept the financial reports as presented? So moved. Motion by Mr. Ayers, second. Second by Mr. Crosno. Any discussion? If not, motion and second. All in favor? We have none opposed. The motion carries. Item 17-137, the investment report. Administration recommends acceptance of the third quarter fiscal year 17 report. Dr. Flay's summary report is included in the board book. Are there any questions regarding this item? If not, can I have a motion to accept the investment report as presented? Dr. Gibbons, motion, second? Second by Mr. Ayers. Any discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion second. All in favor? No opposition, motion carries. Item 17-138, investment policy review. In accordance with the Texas Public Funds Investment Act, the administration reviewed the university's student investment policies and determined that no changes would be recommended this year. The current policies are shown in the board book. The administration recommends approval of these policies as shown. Are there any questions regarding this item? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve these policies as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Crosno, second.
Second.
Second by Dr. Gibbons. Any discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion second. All in favor? No opposition, motion carries. Next item is 17-139, approval of broker-dealers, investment vehicles, and asset holding accounts. The administration recommends approval of the firms listed in the board book. Those firms are the same as we approved last year. To have a motion to authorize these firms as presented.
So moved.
Mr. Ayers with the motion, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Cosno. Any questions for Chris regarding this item? Hearing none, we have a motion second. All in favor? No opposition, motion carries. Item 17-140, university signature authorization. Each year, the board is asked to approve individuals authorized to sign university bank accounts, purchase and sell investment instruments, perform normal banking transactions, and sign retirement documents. The recommendations are included in the board book. It's the same list as those approved last year. Can I have a motion to authorize these individuals as presented? Dr. Gibbons with a motion, second. Second. Second by Mr. Ayers. Any discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion second. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Item 17-141, salary title position changes for the fiscal year 17 budget. Reports of personnel changes in April, May, and June are presented for information only. The salary title and position changes are presented for ratification. As you can see, 6 staff positions were filled below the budgeted amount. The director of fireman position was added, and 1 position was reclassified. Any questions regarding these reports? Hearing none, can I have a motion to ratify the personnel changes as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Crosnell with a motion, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Ayers. Any discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion second. All in favor? Carries unanimously. 17-142.
That was easy.
Thank you, Dr. Floyd.
Didn't get out of it.
Valerie is headed to the podium for the operating budget. The administration recommends approval of the $117,193,719 operating budget for fiscal year 18 as presented. A copy of the budget highlights is included in the board book. Of course, we had a good discussion of the budget this morning. Before we have comments and presentations by Dr. Shipley, Dr. Flay, and Valerie, could I have a motion to accept the budget as presented? Mr. Ayers with a motion, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Crosno. Dr. Shipley?
I defer to him.
It's deferring, Marilyn. Dr. Flay?
Great. All right, so we had a great discussion this morning, and now I'm going to give you kind of the very 30,000-foot level view of the budget. So again, the budget that we're recommending to you is $117 million. We're assuming the $6,150 in fall enrollment. We've made a significant investment in our faculty and staff, as you saw, on our strategic priorities. And when you look at the budget overall, almost half of the entire $117 million is faculty, staff, salaries, and benefits. Debt service payments have went up almost $4 million, and that's pretty much due to that tuition revenue bond of $58.4 million in debt. All of the debt service for that is coming from state appropriations. So while state appropriations overall went up, it's all due to the TRB money. We still, as far as the operating side, had a decrease. We will be using about $650,000 in one-time monies to make the budget balance. And then the Flower Mound initiative is expected to bring in $1 million with $1.1 million in expenditures.
Okay, question.
Sure.
Will any of the campaign money be used for overcoming that deficit, or will it all be earmarked for other uses?
That's not what we plan to. We're using current operating. So if we get gift monies in above and beyond what we showed you on that restricted list, which are monies pretty much in hand, then that could be additional expenditures that we would come to you. So let's say we get another wonderful scholarship gift from a foundation, and we want to give out additional scholarship dollars above and beyond what we're currently doing, we would come back to you. Because what we're budgeting right now is what we know we have in hand.
But a good example of how it could offset is if you look at the Davenport gift, we held that back. We had $50,000. He stipulated it could be used for faculty salaries. If Tony or I get a gift that stipulates a more general use for faculty salaries or a general use for scholarships, if it's not strictly designated, it's easier to apply in the moment. When it's designated, it has to go for what it was intended for, and that often requires new outlay of money.
Yes.
And yeah, so I think my question was, do we anticipate receiving the undesignated funds as part of the campaign? If so, would those go in reserve?
Yes.
Okay.
We would love to.
Like if you got a new endowment that's supposed to pay for, let's say, one of the dean's salaries, then absolutely it would help.
It can often happen that bequests are undesignated, and that's why they're so valuable. So the Red Wine Fund, the Red Wine request was a request without any strings attached whatsoever.
Okay.
Great question. So the budgeted sources of funds, again, the general revenue is your state appropriations, and it looks like we're going up. Again, that is due to the $4 million in debt about almost $4 million a year in debt service payments, netted against the 1.75 or 725 that we received in reductions. So that's the net effect. Tuition fees is going up ever so gradually with the enrollment increases we predicting and the rate increases that you all approved. Auxiliary, we're showing is just about flat, although we're anticipating that we will be in above budget. Heat, again, is flat. Will be flat for 5 years. Other E&Gs tick down just a little bit. Again, that's your interest, your vending, your bookstore. So you see that kind of gradually being reduced. And then restricted, we got a little bit of an uptick with some of those major things you saw on the list. So as far as a pie with the percentages, things have stayed relatively the same. Tuition and fees has dropped down a little bit because of the increase in the restricted funds. Our restricted funds have really gone up quite a bit because of the state and the federal funds. And then a nice pretty gift too. Our budgeted uses of funds, this is a pretty interesting chart from the standpoint is faculty has remained a little bit flat. Staff has gone up for 2 reasons. One, because of the increases in the salaries that we're investing in, but also because we're adding quite a few positions. We'll get to the FTE here on a different slide, but you'll see we're adding a number of staff positions. The scholarships, GAs, financial aid, again, that's that nice uptick because of the federal funds, state funds, restricted funds. Wages have gone down just a little bit as we're trimming our budgets. People are reducing like their student wages and stuff in order to make some of those reductions we talked about. Fringe benefits. The interesting thing on fringe benefits, and I know I've kind of beat a dead horse on this one, but if you look from 10 to 18, we've gone up 50% in our expenditures on our benefits, whereas our salaries on our faculty and staff have only gone up about 18%. So quite a dramatic increase as far as the rate increase between the wages or the salaries and the benefits. The fringe benefits isn't just due to active faculty and staff. Retirees are all in that too. And I did do an analysis, I believe you all received, on how much the retirees are continuing to cost us, and it's escalating as we go. Operations and capital, relatively flat. Utilities, relatively flat. Debt service, big jump with the TRB. And the legacy is 100% now being paid. So our budgeted uses of funds, pretty flat. It looks like salary and wages has shrunk as a portion of the pie because the debt service is kind of taking up a little more room as far as the totals. Everything else is relatively the same except for M&O and travel because of the reductions people had to make to their budgets in order to get us to be a little closer to being balanced.
Marilyn, how does our debt service ratio measure out against other institutions right now?
I would have to go back and look at that. One of the things I did want to comment on, though, is when we look at Moody's and Fitch, they recognize that state, the TRB, and they pull that out, and they don't really include it in their calculations because they know the state's picking it up.
But all the state institutions in Texas are like that. I'd be very curious to know what other Texas, I don't really care about other states, just Texas institutions, state institutions, what their debt service ratios are compared to ours.
Okay, we can look at that. Yeah, especially because
I
they've
think
all gotten these big TRB.
Yeah, I think I remember you telling us before most of them were double digits. Back we were single digits. We just slipped into double digits.
I'd have to go back and look. Well, it's been a while since we looked at that. Now we've got the TRB in there. So just to kind of reiterate the investments that we're making, the increases to this year's budget, where the money's going, is additional scholarship money from the grants and the scholarship money of almost $1.5 million. The increased debt service on the tuition revenue bonds is $3.25 million. your faculty and staff pay raises, the net change. We do have some faculty and staff like new hires that will come in lower than what the current person was making, but when you net all that out, it's an increase of $800,000. Benefit costs are almost $500,000. Software costs, you saw that, $70,000. The academic expansion is $1.1 million with 7 staff, FTE, and faculty. Now, the additional marketing that we have in the Metroplex is $250,000, and we're adding the paralegal for a half a year and the internal auditor for the other half of the year. So that's a 1 FTE total of $67,000 for the two combined. Again, the HEAP, we reviewed this morning. Facility services and maintenance, we're investing $1.1 million. Debt service takes up $1.5 million. Information technology, $1.1 million. Library, $500,000. Academic equipment, $400,000, and then general university reserve of $262,000. And this is what's happening to the FTE, so it's a bit of a jump. We don't usually have that big of a jump, but we are investing multiple positions in the Dallas-Fort Worth Academic Initiative. So we started out at the beginning of the year with 695 FTE. We're adding a couple of the positions in DFW for nursing and respiratory care. We talked about that. We're converting 2 faculty to staff positions, and one of the faculty is going to the DFW staff position, the DFW faculty position. Accreditation, we're adding 2 positions for both education and business. And then we're adding, we reduced 3 positions because of retirements or vacancy kind of things. So that was 2.5. We're adding the 2 half positions. The research administrator, we're doing away with that consulting contract, but adding in a full-time position to keep the activities going. And then we're adding 4 staff positions to the Flower Mound campus. You approved the 1 position for Randy already, so that's a total of 5 staff positions that will be present at the Flower Mound campus. And then we have a number of restricted fund additions that are being paid off of the what they call soft money. And then just a few net adjustments of people moving from a 0.75 to a 0.83 or that kind of thing. So the total that you'll see in the budget is 704 and a half positions. Any questions on the ins and outs, the FTEs? So I think really good investments in these positions, compliance, outreach, research, that kind of thing. And then this is an analysis of our reserves, just so you can kind of get a picture of where we are. And I want to, big caveat on this is these are all projections. So the fund balance is as of the end of August 31st, 2018. This is what we estimate is going to be at the end of next year. So in order to calculate this, we've got to kind of estimate where it is at the end of this year, and we haven't closed the books yet. So we're kind of taking an estimate of where we're going to end up this year. Then you take the effect of the budget. If we brought in all the money we say we're going to bring in and spend all the money we budget on expenditures, then this is where you'd end up. So if you think about it, this is going to be $650,000 or so less than we project we're going to have right now, right? Because we're going to use up some of the funds. So we're still sitting at about $19 million. We like to sit a little bit on the state dollars. Designated is your big fund where you have most of your reserves located. Auxiliary, we've been investing pretty heavily in our auxiliaries to expand the housing and make it nice for the students. Our grants, gifts, federal support is about 4.2, and then plant funds, we're still sitting at 788. And that was your question, do you have enough money using up some of that facilities fund? We're sitting at almost 800,000.
Is this reserve amount acceptable or more than expected, or?
Yeah, I think it's pretty healthy. I wouldn't say that I'd want to spend it down half, but it's about where you'd want to be. This is about where we want to be. So to have a balanced budget year to year to year would be great, because then you're going to maintain this. If you go deficit, then if we don't make revenues or we overspend, then we'll start digging into that, and we don't want to do that. So,
isn't it true that that helps us with our debt capacity?
yes. So they look at this. They look at your ratios, your financial ratios, and I calculate that at the end of every fiscal year. I do a set of ratios based on where we end up, and I'd be happy to share that with the board when we finish up and present the financials in November, so you can see kind of what our ratios are. So yeah, I think this is pretty good. Auxiliaries, like that to be a little more healthy, and we can get there once we start filling up the dorm, the new Legacy Hall, and we're adding residential students. But we've been investing very heavily in that new facility and in the food service. You saw the Mustang's Corner today, Maverick's Corner. So we've been investing very heavily in things that make the difference to the students. So I'm positive that's going to be bouncing back in the very near future.
Dr. Fella, am I reading this correctly? The 12.7 is designated, so while it's in the pool of reserves, we couldn't actually pull it out, could we?
Yes,
If we got a budget
yes,
problem?
it's designated as a fund title, but it means it's designated for something. It's not necessarily restricted.
Okay.
It's an accounting term.
Okay.
That's the old unreserved, isn't it? What used to be called unreserved? Or
Well, we've always
undebt?
called it
I don't.
Unrestricted.
Unrestricted, that's the word I'm looking for, unrestricted.
It's designated for any purpose of the board.
Right, but back in my day, when I was doing audits on these not-for-profits, unrestricted was the term we used. That dates me.
No, that's still you.
Is it?
You're okay.
Okay, good. So anyway, I think it's a good plan to move forward with. Like I said, I think it takes care of a lot of the strategic initiatives, and we've put it together very carefully to present to you today. That's a very reasonable budget, given the surprise we had at the end of May. So, and then in 19, I think as we move forward, we'll get back to where it's a balanced budget. Any questions?
Well, I think y'all did a terrific job I was never dreamed we would have a balanced budget after that. So I know y'all spent a lot of time on this, and great work.
Yes, I think Dr. Shipley has a lot to commend to Dr. Shipley and the other vice presidents. We all, as a team, really came together to try to figure out how to make the best of not a great situation.
Well, the leadership helped, but your staff is the one who entered all this, so it was a thank you, Valerie.
Valerie and Anna.
It was unbelievable.
So to get that
fast,
you have to juggle.
Yeah,
they were
a lot of overtime on their part.
A lot of overtime, weekends, evenings to put it together. So
fun.
Valerie's done it for many, many years. So my 26th budget. So a lot of institutional knowledge there. Okay, great.
All right, thank you, Dr. Floyd.
I'd just make a comment that
Yes, sir.
as a board member, I feel very appreciative of the work they do and how comfortable we feel with the numbers, and a lot of institutions where we all serve on. It's very difficult to get hard numbers, and I just would commend everybody for that.
Thank you so much.
All right, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we have a motion and second. All in favor? Passes unanimously. Motion carries unanimously. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes the business of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. We'll move on to the Audit, Compliance, and Management Review Committee. Ms. Burks, are you still with us?
I'm here.
I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Audit, Compliance, and Management Review Committee will now come to order. Members of the committee here today are Dr. Gibbons, Mr. Gregg, and Mr. Hessing. The first item, 17-143, is the approval of the minutes of the committee meeting held on May 11th, 2017. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, they stand approved as presented. I'm kind of at a disadvantage because I can't see y'all. Maybe I should turn it on the streaming thing so I can see. good idea. Item 17-144, Compliance Activities Update. An update on compliance activities since the last board meeting was prepared by Mr. Stovall, and he is present to provide information if necessary. Are there any questions regarding the report by Mr. Stovall?
Doesn't look like it.
Well, after discussion, this item is presented as a point of information only, and no action is necessary. Item 17-145, Audit Activities Update. Ms. Kidwell prepared an update on audit activities since the last board meeting, and she's here to provide information as needed. Are there any questions concerning this report?
One quick question. Yes. On the breakdown, Leah, of substantially complete. When we say substantially complete, that means like what?
As a percentage, maybe 80 to 95%. The majority of the work has been done. There might be a few remaining details before it's 100% complete. I'm totally complete.
But when we say substantially complete for compliance purposes, you feel like that's already kind of like in the done category, or?
Yes, I would say it's closer to in the done category.
Okay. I was just wondering because when I saw that breakdown, I was like, substantially complete to me means in the done category.
I agree.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, are there any other questions?
I guess I have one question about the Myers and Stopper report where it says it's security sensitive and not for public distribution. How are we supposed to know what it said?
We'll talk about it in closed session.
Okay.
So
okay, if there are no other questions, then this item is presented as a point of information only and no action is necessary. Item 17-146, Fiscal Year 2018 Audit Plan. Ms. Kidwell's audit plan is presented in the board book for our review and approval. Lee, would you please present your plan to the board?
Thank you, Tiffany. Good afternoon, Regents. I'm pleased to submit the Fiscal 18 audit plan today for your approval. This year, for next year, the Office of Internal Audits has 2 full-time employees, myself, the director, and an auditor. I'm so thankful to have her with me. It equates to a 33% increase in the number of audit hours and projects that we can complete for the upcoming year. So that's a substantial increase. The hours that we can allocate after university holidays, vacations, or other leave is now over 3,600 for the upcoming year. These hours are allocated among required audits by statute, risk-based audits, special projects, investigations, committee service, as well as running the department and just administration. Of these hours in the plan, over 15% is allocated to assisting management with their special requests, special needs, and following up on the implementation of all of the recommendations from this year's audits, which is a substantial amount of time. I'll be happy to answer any questions. The audit plan is actually in your book.
Are there any questions for Lee?
No questions, but I'll tell you I appreciate this board investing in that process. I know that it's a challenge in this financial time. It's been tight, but I think that is a tremendous investment in the overall operations of the university and the security of the board and what we do. So I know it's tough, but I think it's very value added.
Well, that's the best compliment to the board, of course, but to me, I'm very glad for the investment as well.
Well, I think I have a question.
Yes, sir.
One of the risk areas I think we identified in the last couple of years was with our IT function. But that only has 240 hours. And some of the activities on here appear to be, looks like to me maybe some of them are over budgeted, such as Public Funds Investment Act compliance. And that may be under budgeted. I may be completely wrong, I'm just curious. As far as number of hours.
And this is a work in progress. I wish I had 26 years of data like Valerie does for the budget, but we're working off basically 1 year's of data. So the hours are my best guess at this point. Every November, I will report back to the board and reconcile between the audit plan estimated hours per project and what it actually amounted to. So my guesstimates will get better every year, but I just don't have enough history
Right.
under my belt.
Okay.
Okay, well, could I have a motion to approve the audit plan for fiscal year 18 as presented?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, Lee. Oh, wait, Lee.
One more.
One more. Item 17-147, Office of Internal Audit's Charter. Ms. Kidwell has prepared a new charter consistent with current standards. Lee, please present the recommended charter.
Thank you. The Internal Audit's Charter is a critical document that states the purpose, authority, and responsibility of both the internal audit activity and the Board of Regents. It's required by the Texas Internal Auditing Act and the International Professional Practices Framework, which is promulgated by the Institute of Internal Auditors. And the Institute changed their framework in 2017, which necessitated the revisions to the charter. The last charter was done in 2015, and with the changes, it required a little tweaking. Of particular interest to the Regents, on the first page under the authority section, it states what the Board of Regents is authorizing the Internal Audit Department to do. In order to be effective, I need full, free, and unrestricted access to all function records, property, and personnel. I need adequate resources. I need to be able to allocate resources, set frequencies, select the audit subjects, determine the scope of work, and apply appropriate techniques in order to accomplish the objectives, and obtain assistance from either necessary university personnel or other specialized services in order to complete specific engagements. On the second page, under the organization section, it lists out exactly what the board has a responsibility for in order, again, to make sure that this department has the resources in order to be effective and give the board that assurance. Approve the Internal Audit Department Charter, which is what we're doing now. Approve the risk-based internal audit plan, which we just accomplished. Approve the Internal Audit Department's budget and resource plan. To receive communications from the director on department's performance relative to the plan and other matters. Approve decisions regarding the appointment and removal of the director. Approve the remuneration of the director. And maybe most importantly, make the appropriate inquiries of management and the director to determine whether there is any inappropriate scope or resource limitations, which would limit the information that comes to the board. So I like this new framework because it really lists out the relationship between the department and the board, and also who's responsible for what. And then I won't read the rest of it because it goes into a lot of detail about what my further responsibilities are. But I'll be happy to answer any questions on the charter.
Are there any questions of Lee regarding the proposed charter?
Yeah, Lee, are there any unbudgeted responsibilities that you name here?
Do I have any unbudgeted?
In the charter, are there any unbudgeted items that are there?
No, sir.
Okay.
No.
Do you ever meet independent with the audit committee, separate from administration, something so you can talk through things?
I do. Tiffany and I have a conference call every month, and then another one usually right before the Board of Regents. I also send out a monthly update to the entire committee so that they can see every month what's been going on in my department.
Any other questions for Lee? Could I have a motion to approve the internal audit charter as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. I just want to say, to piggyback on what Lee just said, we do speak, and I just want to thank Lee for taking time out of her day to visit with me about the Audit and Compliance Committee information. It really is helpful for me in understanding what is the university needs and why it is so important. And I just want to thank Lee and her staff for being so diligent and making sure that we're in compliance. Thanks again, Lee.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time as well.
No problem. That concludes the business to come before this committee, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Burks. The Committee of the Whole will now reconvene. The Board of Regents will go into an executive session to discuss item 17-115A, consultation with attorney, and 17-115B, real property, 17-115C, gifts or donations, 17-115D, personnel matters, and 17-115E, deliberations regarding security audits is allowed by the Texas Government Code sections 551, 071, 072, 073, 074, and 076. For the record, the date is August 3rd, 2017, and the time is 8:87. Dr. Shipley, Mr. Maka, Ms. Barrow, and Ms. Kidwell may remain for the first part of the discussion.
All right, so it's break time.
Okay, break.
Great, the closed session is complete. The only items discussed were those items announced, and no votes were taken. The Committee of the Whole will resume an open session. Is there any further action to come before the board? If not, that concludes our meetings today. I thank you for your participation. I look forward to seeing you guys again. That is at 6 o'clock, not at the house, but at the lake house. So our meeting will resume tomorrow at 9 a.m. We are adjourned.